MC. I'm Ray Murasame, and as you can probably guess from the title of this live stream, we're debating comicsgate, and the question is going to be, are progressive activists ruining comics? So I'm moderating the conversation. I'm not actively contributing to it, but I'll give full disclosure, of course, from the start that I approach politics from the perspective of socialist third worldism tendency, and I happen to be an advocate of post-colonial feminism, and I operate the Stage 501 live stream channel, and I also work in the defense sector. None of this, I promise, will have any impact on my approach to moderating if I can help it, because how can I put this? I know only enough about the subject to moderate the two sides, but I will not interject my opinion into the conversation unless it is absolutely necessary for me to do so. So I'll be striving to be as even-handed as possible. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through introductions. So everyone will get about 3 minutes to introduce themselves, and then we will go through the opening statements for each of those persons as well. So everyone will be able to have 3 minutes for their opening statements, and then we will go to an open floor. So when we're in the open floor conversation, any clashes that happen with people, say, yelling or talking over each other, which I hope will not happen, then I will interject and basically pull people apart if necessary. So with that said, I mean, we can actually go forward with the introductions, and we can I should also point out that in terms of the two sides here, Adam Friended and Ethan Van Sciver will be on one side, and Croz will be on the other side.
Can we say a little bit about that first? I hate to overtalk you, Ray, but okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so originally it was going to be a 2 versus 2 debate, but the person who was going to be on Croz's side backed out and essentially handed his notes over to Croz, and Croz said he was totally fine with continuing to go forward with it being 2 versus 1. So we decided to go forward regardless of it. So they were given a choice. The other side was, the side that was anti-comicsgate was given the choice as to whether they wanted to go forward with 1 versus 2 in this case, and they said okay.
Do we know why Aiden is anti-comicsgate? Do we know why he left? Is it like a personal thing, or was it a fear of debating?
No. It was personal issues came up in the 2 hours before the stream. So his reason for not being here today is unrelated to anything that happened.
Okay, well that's a shame. Maybe we can reschedule sometime then.
Yeah. Because I mean, he wasn't doing it to be a saboteur or anything like that, or to make any trouble. It was an honest to goodness personal issue that came up in his life that he had to attend to, so he had no choice.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so with that said, we can go introductions, and we'll just go clockwise, I guess. So I guess Adam Friended, you can introduce yourself first, even though this is your channel, so I think everyone knows who you are.
Hey everybody, it's your friend Adam. I'm here on my Think Club channel. Obviously, I am a more recent fan of Comicsgate, so I'm glad Ethan is here. Ethan has actually worked for DC and Marvel, so he should have a lot to say about this. I've kind of roughed out a basic argument that I want to make. Obviously, we're going to have to define terms pretty quickly here. But yeah, I'm a YouTuber. I have the Think Club channel, which I do mostly debates and philosophical musings on. I have my personal channel, Adam Friended, which I do a lot of Comicsgate stuff on, just because I'm working on a graphic novel with my co-host on my Sunday show, Adam and Sitch, or Sitch and Adam, and we're kind of an anti-SJW show, and we're doing a comic ourselves. So that's how I actually became acquainted with Comicsgate. There are a lot of people on YouTube that are Comicsgate, and I think of Comicsgate more as just independent comics. So obviously, if you're working on a graphic novel, if you're working on a comic, it helps to get feedback from people who have experience in doing this kind of thing. So I became friends with a lot of the CG guys, and immediately discovered that a lot of people don't necessarily like CG people for what I think are false accusations of like racism, sexism, and homophobia. Which, since that is kind of the crux of our show and even this channel for a long time, I feel like Jordan Peterson was wrongly accused of those things. It seemed like CG was a natural fit for me, so I've been running with these guys ever since. Is that good? Is that 3 minutes? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was pretty good.
Okay.
So I guess Ethan is next.
Hey, I'm
introduction.
Yeah, I'm Ethan Van Sciver. I think this might be my second time on Adam's channel, maybe third. I don't know. Adam's just a member of the family at this point. I I have a YouTube channel called Comic Artist Pro Secrets. I'm very much comicsgate. I feel like I was dragged into comicsgate. I feel like I had to declare that I was comicsgate. I was a comic book artist for DC Comics for 25 years when the culture shifted. And I feel like I was pushed out because of my politics. I was caught quite unaware by what had actually happened, by the fact that SJWs had taken over the business and had obtained quite a lot of power. So I have I've gone on YouTube. I've gone independent as a comic book publisher. My 25 years of experience working in the mainstream has served me well towards that end. My comic book Cyberfrog is crowdfunding its second issue now. It's raised over $1 million in crowdfunding. That doesn't mean it's $1 million in my pocket, SJWs. I mean, I do have to pay taxes and but it's a lot of money. And I think that the response to Cyberfrog from fans proves that there is a waiting and enthusiastic audience for comics produced by people that don't think that the audience is made up of oppressors. Other comic skaters are having similar success as well. We're going to talk about, I hope we talk about how the industry is declining right now, the reasons for that. And I hope to have a good discussion with Croz here, who has been muted, but he did say hello once. I like his avatar. Thank you.
Okay, well said. So, Croz, you are next, and you can introduce yourself, obviously, with anything that you want to say.
Thanks, Ray. First of all, I just wanted to thank Adam for hosting and Ray for moderating and organizing this conversation. I'm Cody Crosman. I live in Canada. Most of my friends call me Croz. I worked in a comic store for 2.5 years. All my clout comes from the Magic the Gathering community, but we did kind of face some of these culture war issues back in the day with the quartering. I identify as a SOCDEM liberal. I consider myself left of center. I'm socially left, but capitalist by default. My main disagreements with comicsgate are that I sometimes perceive it as a community built around obsessively shitting on people and things. I don't think comic skaters are necessarily bad people or evil. I think that you're just misguided. I think you guys are right about the decline of the comics industry, but you're right for the wrong reasons. And most of the analysis I've seen comes from a place of confirmation bias. And I feel like at times we're kind of doing manufactured outrage to fuel YouTube ad revenue. And yeah, I think that about summarizes my thoughts on who I am.
Well, that's great. It sounds like we should have a great discussion then.
Yeah.
I hate to interrupt again, Ray, but you're using notes from, is it Aiden as well? Maybe we should give some introduction to him as well.
Okay, yes. Since Cody is using Aiden's notes, you can give like a description on him as well, even though he couldn't be here today. Are you okay with doing that?
I don't know Aiden that well. He was someone else who also worked in I believe a comic store. We really only chatted last night for this, unfortunately, but it seemed like we had pretty much overlapping thoughts and from our experiences just working in stores and kind of seeing the comics industry from the retail side firsthand. Unfortunately, I just don't know him that well. Sorry, guys.
Okay, well, I don't want you to have to
enough.
speak for him if you don't. I'm just curious if he had similar beefs to you. So it sounds like you have the general beefs that we're hearing all of the time.
I think that's more accurate, right? I think he was more kind of ho-hum on like the culture war side of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. So with all of that said, then, I mean, we can go in for, I don't know, opening arguments, even though people have already kind of given these, like, incorporated into their introductions already. So, I mean, it's up to you guys, like, how long you want those to go for, because either which way, whatever happens, open floor happens immediately afterwards. So you guys can give, like, a bit of a back and forth on this now. So each of you will have a chance to speak for about 3 minutes on, I guess you could say, like, how you were brought into this comicsgate controversy in the first place, any accusations that people may have leveled against you, etc., etc. Like, you know, what your outlook going into this conversation is going to be? I mean, I understand that you guys did sort of cover this in your introductions a little bit already, but I'll just give you a chance anyway.
No, I think I'll go first. I think an opening argument around any question about whether or not progressive politics is ruining comics, I think we kind of have to define what ruining comics is. So I'm looking generally, and it sounds actually like Croz agrees with this. I'm looking generally at the decline of comics from the mainstream perspective. Like DC Comics recently laid off a third of their editorial staff, I think just this week. And Jim Lee, the publisher of DC Comics, says that up to 25% of their titles are losing money. So in that third of their editorial staff, 600 people got laid off, many of them senior editors, marketing and administrative personnel. So that, to me, is kind of what I am looking at in terms of how progressive politics may be responsible for this decline. Do you want to interject, Ethan?
Well, I mean, yeah, you're talking about the beginning of the end result of these things, and I think that all of this stuff happened because the mainstream, Marvel and DC, for reasons that I cannot really fathom, we can speculate, began to allow activists into the comic book industry, social justice warriors who believe in activism for activism's sake, and they began to basically take over how comics were sort of gate kept, and they began to insert their own politics into the comics. While they were doing this, it was a very strange thing. They started to chase away customers. They started to use these mainstream comic book characters to espouse their kind of identity politics, while calling anyone who complained names and telling them, "Don't buy my comics anymore." There is absolutely no nobody who's stopping this from happening. Nobody who is guarding people's social media and saying, "Hey, you work for us. Stop telling people to not buy comics." And I do believe that many editors were kind of bullied into allowing these transformations to take place within the comic books themselves. And what we've seen a decline in sales all across the board for American superhero comics. And I want to make that clear because, social justice warriors and leftists and people who are in denial about what's happening to the American comic book industry are quite happy to go along with the gaslighting that's being done by the industry itself to cover its own death. By saying, "Hey, manga comics," they mix manga sales in with the sales of American superhero comics. They mix YA novel sales in. I mean, Dogman's doing well. Captain Underpants is doing well. So certainly that means the comic book industry is healthy for people like me and people who draw Superman and Batman comics. This is just not the case. And the idea, the fact that Jim Lee had to come forward today or yesterday and say that 25% of the line is actually losing money, when they have cut the line already, they've trimmed the line down to 50 books a month, is devastating. Something is causing this. And it isn't COVID. It isn't COVID that is causing these books to decline in sales. Because also Three Jokers by Jeff Johns and Jay Fabok sold 300,000 copies at $8 a book. That's an apolitical comic about, something fun, something exciting, by a super talented team of creators, and there is still a market for that. But there's no market for Vertigo, for New Vertigo. That had to be closed down. And there's no market for, I would say more than half of what DC and Marvel are putting out right now. This 25% cut is just the beginning. It's going to get whittled down to 15 books a month from DC Comics, and Marvel will probably follow suit. I think we can blame that overall. I believe we can blame that on bad customer service, broadly speaking. We can get into that tonight and talk about, how this all worked out. But, the regular customers of comic books were chased away. Well, let's just be honest about that. That is what has been happening over the last 10 years.
So I just want to be clear here, because so we're talking about the argument for why the comic book industry is being destroyed. I know Croz said in his intro that he also believes that the comic book industry is in decline as well. So I think that might be a central point of the debate. That's why I brought it up. Do you want to respond, Croz?
Yeah, for sure. I'm not sure if I'm going to need all 3 of my minutes here. So when I hear some of these arguments, this is why I brought up confirmation bias in my introductions. We're talking about DC laying off staff members. And I think it's fair to attribute that, at least in some part, to this global pandemic we're experiencing right now. I mean, every company is laying off people.
Yeah, I figured that was going to be the argument. That's why I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah. I mean, I'm open to the idea that, it's not 100% a contributing factor, and it's
Are you open
to
the fact that the idea that it's 0% of the factor? The pandemic, global pandemic, has nothing to do with why DC is laying off its staffers right now. It has everything to do with AT&T and their merger, and the fact that AT&T is already $151 billion in debt and acquired Time Warner for the sake of creating a streaming service to get out of debt. And DC Comics is entirely pointless towards that end. And so they are slowly, bit by bit, divesting themselves of the publishing.
I'm certainly open to the idea. The idea that this global pandemic is 0% of the reason is a hard sell to me personally.
Well, let me explain. They actually made this decision in October of 2019, before the pandemic was a gleam in a bat's eyeball in a bowl of soup. Adam, is that where the pandemic came from? Bat soup or no? Have I been led down some racist path?
I'm not exactly sure. The China flu, as
yes.
People sometimes call it.
Yeah. No, they made this decision in October of 2019, before the pandemic was even an issue. Elliott Management hedge fund had to sit down with AT&T and say, we like this merger. This is a great idea, but you're going to have to start firing some people here, and you're going to have to start trimming some fat. I said back in January of 2019, when this became clear that this was going to happen, and again in June of 2019, when it became clear that this summit meeting between Elliott Hedge Fund, which is a $1 billion investor, billions of dollars of investment into AT&T. I said this was going to happen, and it did. It did happen. Almost immediately we saw some changes happening. Dan DiDio lost his job, and they began to they cut the hell out of. They really did. They beat the hell. Mark Chiarello lost his job suddenly. The lettering department, the coloring department of DC Entertainment, of DC Comics, I should say. It became clear that the comic book publishing department of Time Warner, also known as DC Comics, was completely superfluous, and they were going to remove it piece by piece like a cancer. And they started last year, and COVID has absolutely nothing to do with it. It's true. They can work from home just as effectively. You're seeing other companies do that right now. You can work from home. COVID is not preventing people from making comics in the mainstream at all.
Sure, but you can understand why. I think, what is unemployment in the U.S. right now? Aren't we at like 25% or something crazy like that? Like, we've hit unprecedented numbers of unemployment. You can understand why, with many people losing their jobs and they have less disposable income, maybe one of the first things they cut is a hobby like comics, right?
Yes, perhaps. They're not cutting my comics. They're not cutting any comicsgate comics. We're doing better than ever. I think the people's financial concerns at this point have not manifested themselves. This is America. People still are buying everything that they want when they can get it. I'm not seeing any of this people cutting back on things. I'm seeing people decide, and they have been deciding for the last 3 or 4 years, to stop buying Marvel comics because they don't want to be insulted by their superheroes anymore. We just got DC Comics very wisely fired Andy Corey, editor at DC, this week. It's a good thing that they did. Andy Corey actually said on Twitter, he said, you know what? A lot of the problem we're finding with our fans is that they're realizing that they've grown up to be the type of person that their favorite superhero would punch in the face. This is intolerable, Croz. Who is going to buy comic books from a company that will employ editors who turn superheroes on the customers?
Okay, so you believe that, just using an example here, writers like Dan Slott, who are maybe provocative on Twitter towards his comicsgate critiquers, are the main reason why people are being turned off from comics?
No, I'm saying that the main reason comicsgate is growing is because of Dan Slott's behavior towards his customers. Those people who he insults turn around and become comicsgate and then buy Cyberfrog. I appreciate it. Dan is a missionary for Cyberfrog Comics. Dan is a missionary for comicsgate. He's like Avon calling. He's always got something people want. This guy is, when it comes to comicsgate, this guy insults his customers left and right. He says, go fuck yourself to people who are trying to buy Spider-Man comics. It's unimaginable. There are zero standards of behavior in the mainstream comic book industry. And people, I've said this before, I've said, people really, I can relate to this. I'm when I'm a fan of something, be it a rock band or an actor, I really don't want to think that actor or rock band wouldn't like me personally. There's something in me that just goes, I'd like to think that maybe I could have a beer with this guy, and have we'd have a good time, we'd have a good conversation, because I really like their work, and I hope they would like me too. It's a childish thought, but I think it's present in everyone. And when you have a favorite creator, let's say you're reading Spider-Man, and for some reason you're enjoying Dan Slott's Spider-Man, so you're already mentally fragile. Dan Slott tells you to go fuck yourself because you voted for Trump. That is a visceral, that is a psychically, that's a psychic wound for a lot of people that will turn them off from the hobby entirely.
Croz, I want to give you a chance to gather your thoughts, obviously, because of the 2-on-1 situation. But I want to point out that it seems that we're all in agreement that there is declining sales, correct?
Oh, of course. I can't make numbers going down not be reality, right?
Okay, exactly. So there's declining sales, and the focus of the debate is really, why are those sales declining? Like, I think the sales were declining before the COVID thing came along. And there's two different things here that you can say are responsible for the declining sales. And I think both of those can be traced back to progressive politics, because there's the argument that you've made that Dan Slott telling people to fuck off on Twitter is not necessarily good. And I would argue that if people are moving away from comics, can you mute a second, Croz? I think we're getting a lot of background. So if you're making the argument that comic sales are declining because these creators are on Twitter telling people to fuck off, I would say that you could probably blame that on progressive politics. I don't see a lot of conservatives out there that are conservative comic creators telling people to fuck off on Twitter. So I would relate that back to declining sales. And then there's the story aspect, the forcing of progressive politics kind of ham-fistedly into comic books, which, since all of the politics in the comic books that people seem to be objecting to and criticizing are progressive politics, it seems like that could also be responsible for the declining sales.
Sure. Can I just give you guys my opinion of why I think the comics industry is failing?
Please
and then I can maybe more address kind of your points.
Sure, please do.
So I reject this notion that Marvel and DC, the corporate higher-ups, are pushing, I guess we'll call it progressive political ideology for the sake of it or for some ulterior motive. I think their motivation is just what any company's motivation is in a capitalist system: profit. They're just chasing profit. And whether we want to admit it or not, get woke, go broke doesn't apply anymore. diversity is what sells at the moment. And I have plenty of stats on that if we want to go into that. I also think a big problem is that just the way the comics industry works, whether it's how we do direct market pre-sales, how the market itself is oversaturated, certain business techniques that Marvel and DC employ, especially just constantly rebooting their titles to #1 over and over again. The price of it, like how Marvel expects $4 for 22 pages, but for $10 I can buy a manga with 200 pages, or Shonen Jump has 200 pages, and they're offering it for the price of $1. It's really easy to me to see how the way we read comics, or it's easy for me to understand why people are turning away from single issues and they just want to read trades. They just want to read the stories, right? They don't want to pay $5 every week to like buy some single issues.
Do you want to respond, Ethan?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think that it is true that the floppy is dying, much to the chagrin of local comic book stores. The local comic book stores have been the victims of these companies and their predatory publishing practices. What you're describing right now is happening. Because of social justice warriors making people leave comics. Sales decline because people are walking away from comics because the comics have become ideological, and the people that they're interacting with on social media has brought everyone much closer. We get to know each other a little bit, and people have been disenfranchised from the comic book industry, and because of that, all of the problems that you're describing are coming into play. Because there are fewer people buying comics right now. Marvel and DC have to scramble to find ways to get local comic shops to buy more copies to cover for the people that they've chased away. They do this with variant cover schemes. They do this by, canceling and relaunching comics with new #1s all the time. They do this with enormous event comics with literally 50 variant covers. To keep comic book stores off balance and unsure of what their customer base actually consists of and what it's wise for them to order to ensure a complete sellout. In the current comic book industry, books, the quality thereof, because they're selling fewer, profits are slimmer for Marvel and DC. Marvel and DC hire talent in quotes off of Tumblr. I mean, some of the worst artists that they would not meet our standards 15 years ago. These people would not be getting work, but they're affordable. And because they're affordable, they're getting work. Because they're getting work, the comics are getting worse. And because the comics are being purchased less, the cover price goes up to make up for the fact that the sales numbers themselves are in decline. It's interesting. Marvel's like, hey, we're making only slightly less than we did last year. That's because you raised the cover price by $1. It's absolutely all a result of a fleeing of a fan base in flight right now, a customer base in flight. Now we could talk about why the customer base is in flight. I do blame this self-appointed thought police that invaded the comic book industry back in 2005, 2006. Coming in here and saying that these comics are stupid and they are sexist and racist, and a lot of changes need to be made. We have a whole series of comic book professionals within the comic book industry who have gotten everyone in line very quickly, who seem to be dedicated to rooting out behavior that they deem problematic in others. Rather than doing their work. These people, they assume bad faith in anyone who isn't a social justice warrior automatically. And that includes the fans. And, under these circumstances, and this is a very real thing, I've experienced it firsthand. I've seen how social justice warriors exist at the very highest levels of Warner Brothers and how they exert their pressure on normal people all the way down. I watched Dan DiDio, former president, former publisher of DC Comics, look at me and go, that's not who we are. Mouthing the words of Barack Obama in front of Diane Nelson to me. Diane Nelson is a social justice warrior. She's no longer there. Dan DiDio's no longer there. But listen, they had all of these people in their grips because disagreeing with these people, disagreeing with their insistence, their demands that their opinions, their political views be enshrined as social customs. But not only that, the rule of these companies, the way that they do business, it's impossible. It's impossible to thrive with them and disagree with them at the same time. All of this has led to a downward spiral. Customers in flight, comic book prices going up, the quality of comics going down, comic book publishers adapting, I would say, almost sinister publishing practices in order to sell more product. And comic books these days, Croz, you know this because you were are you a retailer? Are you still a retailer now?
I'm not currently, but I did it for 2.5 years, and I handled our orders for the store, so I'm pretty experienced.
Awesome.
On that side.
Now you know that now, as compared to say 1988 or 1990, these comics they age like bread. You put these comics out on the shelf, and if they, you've invested $2 in a $3.50 issue of Spider-Man, your profit of $1.50 depends on somebody buying that issue within 2 weeks, because if it does not sell in 2 weeks, it's utterly worthless. It's moldy. It's literally like bread. You can't sell those things. They have to go into quarter bins. The back issue market for recent comics has been absolutely devastated by the fact that you've already fooled people. People are not buying these things. People are not following the stories as though these stories are classic. These books end up in quarter bins, and retailers cannot return them. There's a non-returnable standard in the direct market. It's not like the magazine business.
Is your viewpoint on this then, Ethan, that the people who are in charge of making these decisions have gotten out ahead of the culture on where they are on specific social issues, and through their desire to kind of signal their awareness of certain issues that are playing out in the real world, they have imported these into the comics world and then have expressed surprise at what you perceive as the customer base rejecting these things or seeing them as an outside imposition on what had previously existed?
Yeah, I think there's some of that. I think there's some of that. I think some of it is this what people want? Because it's everywhere. Because it's it's in the air. It's in the water. Social justice it's the air that you breathe in New York City. It's the air that you breathe in California, in Burbank, where DC's located, in Manhattan, where Marvel Comics is located. They don't understand who their customer base is because they're being emotionally blackmailed by professional activists who infiltrate the comic book industry, worm their way into positions of influence, and bully everyone else to get them in line.
So I mean, in your conception, you end up with people confusing their customer base with the people they're encountering in the activist scene, and these two bases are completely separate groups of people. One of which is numerically quite small compared to the original base that you're describing.
Yeah, I think the customer base. Yes, I agree with that. I think the customer base is voluminous and quiet. And the people who are pushing these politics, this quasi-religious view of identity, these people are small in number. They do not buy comics. They're only interested in changing comics. They're noisy. They're interested in changing comics and culture in general to reflect their own personal values. And then they don't even seem to support the comics themselves. If all of these changes that are coming about in comics were actually selling more comics, I guess we'd all have to adapt to it. If quote unquote diversity and inclusion, okay, and I use those in quotes, I refuse to honor those two terms as being anything other than disingenuous. But if those two terms actually sold more comics, I'd be doing it too. I'd be like, okay, well, we need more of this in our that would be the first thing that went through my head.
Okay,
they're not
really saying
comics.
that the market research doesn't match up with what they're saying. Do you think that there's a point in time at which what they're doing would have been the correct thing? It's just that that time has not yet come, or are you say, or would you say that that time simply would not come? I.e., there would never be a scenario in which the demographic they're trying to appeal to would actually be the people buying comics. Like, are you saying this is an issue of time, or an issue of would it ever happen at all?
Well, I think that women. Are you speaking of women buying comics? Because I think that is their fantasy. Is that, and this was how it was pitched to me early on. I mean, people were saying, if we just kind of show more, change these characters into women, if we sort of do less men-based stuff and add more females. Ethan, certainly you understand. Right now we're only selling 50% of the comics that we could. If we put more women into roles in these comics, more and more of them, then we would have more women buying comics. These are the delusions of men and activists. This is not the real world. I talk to my wife and I say, "You want to watch Star Wars?" And she says, "No." And I say, "Well, what if I put more girls in it? What about Rey? Don't you like? Now are you going to watch it?" And she goes, "No." You understand there are differences between men and women. There are some women who are certainly into comic books, and they always have been. Nobody had to pander to them. Men didn't have to say, "Oh, we have to change this so that you like it." They already liked it. They liked it the way that it was. What they've done instead is they've got these monstrous scenes of like female Thor beating the crap out of the Absorbing Man and saying, "This is what you get for using feminism as a dirty word." Who is that for? Who is that little scene for? Is that for guys? Is that for the audience of Thor? Or are you chastising the audience of Thor?
It does seem a little forced, the way that you've described it there. It does seem like they've kind of forced that in there, right? So, I mean, obviously, I'll put this back to Croz as well. Like, how would you respond to, like, everything that Ethan has just said in response to my question? That they're forcing these things in there for a specific purpose that doesn't match with what the market wants.
I want to make a quick point just to clarify the argument that Croz seems to be making. He seems to be saying that market forces are to blame for the decline of the comic book industry, and that the market has turned to social justice politics to make up for the declining market. That they're not, this declining market is the social justice politics are not responsible for the decline. They're kind of turning to social justice politics to make up for this decline that was other market forces at play.
To be clear, I think that was more Ethan's argument. I do agree.
Ethan is making.
I'm not making that argument. I was sitting there going, "That's a good argument."
I think Ethan is making the reverse of this argument. He's saying that the turn causes the problem.
Yes, yeah. So I've encountered plenty of pros in comicsgate who said, "I saw this coming from a mile away. My editors were asking me to do things that I knew the audience was not going to like, and I did not have the power to stop them because the progressive politics were what was driving the show." So they were forced to actually produce comic books that they knew people were not going to like. And because, in a normal circumstance, you have, generally 50% conservatives, 50% liberals in any kind of institution. Once they started weeding out the conservatives, they got rid of basically all the voices of reason that might say, hey, our audience has a lot of conservatives in there that might not be interested in these kind of messages that we're putting in the comic books.
Right. I guess to start, can we go back to the talent argument? Because that's another case where I agree with you. I think the creative teams, especially from the writing side, have definitely declined, but I think you're right for the wrong reasons.
Okay.
To me, I think the biggest factor is the big two are obviously Marvel and DC, right? And I think it's fair to characterize Image as the smaller, but still technically third place. And
still being ruined by progressive politics, though.
Sure. I was just going to say that from my time working in the industry, a trend I noticed was that writers like Rick Remender, who were kind of, for a while, Marvel's ace writer, just started dropping Marvel once their contract ended and just going straight to Image, which I can totally understand because under Image, you get more creative freedom, less editorial distractions, and you get to retain your story and character royalties if they're adapted into movie and television. Like, I don't think Todd McFarlane got a single cent for that Venom movie that came out. But if they ever make Haunts a movie, that series he wrote for Image, he's probably getting a good chunk of those royalties from Sony.
So what does that have to do? So do I have your? I'm just trying to steelman your argument. You're saying market forces, the competition from manga, the competition from other sources, that was the cause of the decline in the comic book industry, and then they grabbed onto social justice politics. Like, let's just grab this. This is how we fix it. Is that the argument you're making? Like I said,
yeah, somewhat. I understand now what you mean by they're grabbing onto social justice.
Right.
As someone who identifies as oppressive myself, it's weird. I don't normally hear people saying things like, "Oh, these are identity politics," or "This is a social justice warrior movement." So I'm trying to adapt my thought process to what you guys are saying.
Well, I see people sharing pages from comic books that I read and I go, "Yep, that's going to trigger conservatives." Like, that is something conservatives are not going to like. And I mean, I think of it as that's also something that feels like Twilight to me. It's like something that is going to appeal to women but not appeal to men. So I often wonder, you know, do they know that they're doing this, or what is driving this? Because this obviously is not going to drive sales in a male dominated fandom.
They go, this is going to piss off all the right people when they do that. They love it. They take joy and pleasure in hurting, annoying, irritating their audience. And I remember editors saying to me at DC, they'd say an aggravated audience is what was the phrase? Is an in-tuned audience. They're focused. They're into. I can't think of the word now. I'm, old man. Basically what they're saying is when customers are irritated, they're more interested. And so I always found that interesting because I think that's an advertising technique to irritate people. When you repeat a word in an ad over and over and over again, apply directly to your forehead, apply directly to your forehead. Remember that ad that was just head on, apply directly, like, repeat that over and over again, and it irritates people, and then they end up buying it. So I think DC Comics and Marvel Comics both had the same idea, and in a way they're right. It's like the Snowflake and Safe Space characters were so over the top, so annoying, so irritating that people couldn't stop talking about them. And there were some thoughts that boy, they're probably going to cancel that book. And I thought to myself, they better not. That's going to be their highest selling book that month because they made this cartoonishly irritating, in a funny way, an almost self-deprecating way, version of social justice warrior characters. I thought, to that degree, that kind of an argument is correct, but Marvel and DC would just say, look, engaged, that's the word I was looking for. An irritated audience is an engaged audience. Why did you change Dick Grayson's name to Rick Grayson? Why did you do that? And they believe that this causes sales to increase. I don't know if that has anything to do with why they would hire social justice warriors. I tend to not think so. I tend to think that that's sincere. I think that's coming from a place of agenda rather than, marketing forces, like marketing ideas. But it could be. I don't know.
So to be clear, you believe that their own personal agenda is coming before profit?
When we say they, who are we talking about? We're talking about, it's like the writers, the creators, yes. The editors, oftentimes their paychecks are guaranteed. The publishers, I don't know.
I guess I'm talking about more of the higher ups, who the editors report to in like Marvel and Time Warner. Or I guess it's Disney and Time Warner now.
Well, Time Warner was taken over by Dee Dee Myers, the Clintons' former press secretary. And she made it her personal mission to root out people who oppose social justice. I was one of those people. So, yes, I think there are people in high up positions that hire other people who agree And that just trickles right on down the line.
Sure. Sorry, let me just collect my thoughts here.
Yeah, that's fine. I can read a couple super chats if you want to.
Yeah, go ahead if you want to do that.
Yeah.
Quick...
Gemini. Jamimi Samimi. I think I'm calling him Gemini when it's not. When it's not Gemini. Jamimi Samimi for $5. Tell Croz their avatar is cute, Adam, and you look good in that shirt, Adam. Ethan was giving me a hard time about my shirt.
No,
who doesn't like Jordan Peterson? Look at that.
Love Jordan Peterson. Love him.
Didn't Ethan? I think Ethan did the illustrations in Jordan Peterson's first book, 12 Rules for Life, which was an international bestseller. Definitely made Jordan Peterson a very wealthy man. So,
I'm so happy for him.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, I mean, he's had some.
I didn't get nothing.
Ethan's like,
so I did. I got a paycheck. I got a buyout. I got a little bit of money, but I mean, if I'd gotten a royalty on that, that would have been a whole different story. I would.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So maybe this T-shirt's actually triggering Ethan right now.
No. It's all good. No problem.
Oh, Woodchuck 00 for $5 says 38. Oh, maybe I shouldn't read this one. This might cause Croz. I'm trying to let Croz his thoughts.
You can read whatever. I won't be.
38 minutes into the debate, and Croz loses by admitting he has no idea what the comicsgate argument is, even after it was explained to him. So, first of all, I thank you, Croz, for taking the time to do this debate. It's always interesting to get other people's perspective. I encourage that. One of the reasons why I think these different industries are in decline is because there's so much about just denigrating other people's perspective and not really taking it seriously as an argument, which is something kind of Ray had kind of touched on a bit, and I think I'd like to get into a little bit later on, is just if the comics fandom has traditionally been a medium for boys, is it really fair for some big faceless corporation to go ahead and take that from boys and basically hand it over to girls so that they can line their own pockets? Is that necessarily a moral thing for them to do? I would argue that it's not, but.
Okay, so you guys feel like if you're a boy, or let's say traditional comics book reader, that the new series that Marvel and DC put out, they put out, like, DC was literally putting out like 52 issues of ongoings. You think that these comics, none of them will appeal to like the average customer?
Well, I don't necessarily know. I mean, obviously, if they are trying to cater to a market, like if they're trying to cater to a wider market, if they're trying to capture females, like they're saying, we're making a lot of comics for guys, why aren't we selling any comics to girls? I think the problem would be when they're taking established characters who have been marketed to males for 20, 30 years, and then all of a sudden they're changing those characters in substantial ways to market them to females. That's where I would say that's the problem. Like, why aren't they just developing new characters for women?
And this is genuinely an interesting question, so I do want to hear you address this one, Croz.
Sure. When I think of that, I specifically, I don't know if Ethan remembers this, but there was that She-Hulk ongoing that Marvel did, I want to say around like 2015, 2016, where it wasn't like what you would expect from a traditional She-Hulk, where it's, oh, I'm just the woman Hulk and I'm going to beat up the Hulk villains. But it was more of like focused on her as a lawyer. It was more of a slice of life kind of comic. Do you think like that's pushing some kind of identity politics or social justice agenda?
Well, I think the people that they hired to do a terrible comic book is pushing some kind of agenda, because that book was horrible. Whoever wrote that book was not writing She-Hulk. They were writing something else. She-Hulk didn't turn into She-Hulk until issue 4 of that magazine. It was disgraceful. I want to know who is hiring these people. I want to know why editors are afraid to talk to the people that they're hiring, these writers, and say, when you have a Hulk book, he or she needs to turn into the Hulk at least once per issue, because these books come out every month, and that's, people want to see that. You know, if you watch the old Hulk TV show, it was structured very much, every episode was the same way. He turned into the Hulk twice per episode, and that was what was so fun about it. You want to see that transformation. The She-Hulk book was about cooking shows. It was about a cooking show.
Well,
And
it was different, right? It was ambitious, and sometimes,
was it?
yeah, absolutely, it went against the grain. Like, it didn't. I guess I just like don't fundamentally agree with like what you want in a comic and what I want in a comic. I want boundaries to be pushed. I want ambition. I don't want to read Spider-Man fights the Green Goblin 27 times. I love Superior Spider-Man because it changed the status quo, and it was interesting. It was different.
So do you think a comic book industry could survive catering to a tiny minority of customers, though? Because it seems like even if there are people who like strange things, like I would categorize myself in that group. I like the movie Rubber, which nobody likes. Like that movie should never get made in a million years. So yeah, I'm with you. I like unusual stuff, but I don't necessarily know. The debate is really over what is destroying the comic book industry. And if the comic book industry is catering to a tiny minority of people at the expense of a larger readership, and they're catering to that tiny minority based on progressive politics, doesn't that mean that progressive politics are destroying the comic book industry?
Well, I think the main problem I have is I disagree with the characterization that these comics are now being catered towards a small minority. I would say if you looked at DC's New 52, right, 52 titles, probably about 45 of them were your like traditional cape shit superhero stuff, and maybe 7 were like a little more ambitious and a little more female focused titles like Catwoman or Birds of Prey. It's pretty easy to figure out like which ones are marketed to females, right? You can just look at the covers.
Sure, totally. Twilight type stuff.
I guess I just don't understand why, because when you guys say these things like, oh, they're ruining comics, what I'm hearing is I don't like reading these comics, so therefore I don't think anyone does.
Yes.
Well, the numbers. Well, the numbers speak for themselves.
Well, we cited that Thor comic about her like beating feminism, but that was an insanely popular series. I think that was literally Marvel's like best-selling series every month. When what's her name, Jane, like took over for Thor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess it was Jane had cancer and all of this stuff, and it was yeah, sure. I don't say that a book like that caused sales to decline. I used that book to prove that social justice warrior activists were using the comics to espouse their views. That's just a fact.
Yeah, I mean, all artists put a little piece of them or something they believe in as part of their art. This has been like a continuous thing in comics. I don't need to tell you this, right? As someone who worked in the industry.
Well, we're all in agreement, though, that the comic book industry is in the toilet. Like all of us agree on that. We're trying to decipher why it is in the toilet.
I just want to cut in with a quick question here as well. Like, I know that this is going to obviously divide the panel, obviously, because the panel is divided, but it will divide it further when I ask this question. But Croz mentioned just now the presence of politics itself, and he's saying that politics have always been in this form of media. So the question I would have is, do you guys think that the reason why it's become a bigger issue now is because of the fact that it's being done in a very clunky way, where it's very visible as to who is doing what and what real world issues they're referring to in these
yes,
in these comics that have been done in this way? Or is it that, and I suspect Croz might have this as his perspective, is it the case that the audience happens to be steeped in a certain perspective, and so they have noticed it now that the comics are no longer in alignment with that perspective? Which one of these two do you guys think is the more probable explanation, or do you think it's like a combination of both of these things happening at the same time?
Well, I'll go first. It sounds like what you're asking is like, are the comics particularly more preachy now, or have they always been preachy and we just haven't noticed?
Yeah.
Well, we just the differences have they always been preachy and we just haven't noticed because they've aligned with our politics, or are they just particularly preachy now? It's really hard to tell exactly how much of it is being driven by political polarization, because they may have been just as preachy in the past, but they aligned with a larger number of people's politics, and now you have a small minority of people who are trying to drive the culture by pressing a fringe kind of political view into comics that noticeably stand out. I would argue that a lot of the social justice stuff is not necessarily like a vetted type of politics, not really a mainstream type of politics. It's a very fringe politics. So you have people in the comic book industry that really they're political activists. They're just in the comic book industry because they feel like this is a good way to change the culture. They're not really comic book fans. They're not really interested in catering to what people like. They really are more interested in driving what is really becoming sort of political propaganda. So either way, I think it helps us on our side of the debate, because we really are talking about these fringe progressive politics that are ending up in the book. So even if politics were always preachy at some level, if they're preachy in a way that people agree with, can you really call them preachy? Aren't they really just helping the culture cohere around a certain narrative that we all agree is kind of the narrative? Ray, Coz, you want to respond?
Well, I mean, I can't be I can't be the one to answer that. It's got to be Croz.
Yeah.
Again, I think this is like a matter of your perspective. From your perspective, these things are preachy, but to someone like me, it's just like, well, yeah, I already inherently agree with these things, so just they'll never bother me.
Right.
And I'm probably more likely to be like, oh, cool, we're finally talking about this issue. I've never read this in a comic before. Yeah, this is cool. I'm interested to see what the artists and like the writer's take is on this. Does that make sense?
Does an industry have an obligation to cater to a wide audience? Like, yes, I understand that they can make comics, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't make comics for fringe political views. I'm just saying that when you take your your masthead product, your superheroes that you've been developing for 30 years, and you turn them into political propaganda, it's a much different proposition than if you start a new character like Safe Space and Trigger Warning or whatever it is. Like, I would be more amicable towards them starting Safe Space and Trigger Warning and laughing my ass off about that, and a bunch of social justice warriors loving it and it becoming a huge hit, than I would turning Batman and Thor into Safe Space and Trigger Warning.
Sure. So I'm glad that you brought up, I think their names were Snowflake and Safe Space.
Okay.
I'm sure everybody watching knows exactly who we're referring to, and I'm not going to defend those people at all.
So you're the audience for them, and you're saying they're bad.
Well, I'm not I don't think there's any audience. For
okay, so debate over. We just won. There's no audience for them.
No. I can say like, oh yeah, I think Marvel has taken missteps. And this is why when we talk about representation, we specifically say we want good representation, not just token representation. An example I can think of similar to this is in the 1940s, Shazam had a black character who, I think his name was Steamboat Bill, was drawn like a minstrel show. Black character, I'm sure we all know what I'm talking about. And that guy was like a literal slave. But the author that introduced the character was white and said, oh, the reason I created this character was because I wanted to expand my audience to more black readers. So it came from a place of sincerity, but the author himself just had no idea what proper black representation looked like.
Yeah, that's like Tony Isabella and Black Lightning, big fat white guy, decides he's going to create a black character. Why black in the name all the time? Why is it always black something? Black Lightning. I've never seen lightning that was black, Adam. If it was black, I wouldn't be able to see it in the sky. It's lightning. It's the same thing. I would like to accuse Tony Isabella right now of creating a minstrel character. Is that irresponsible, Adam? Am I allowed to do that on your platform?
No, you can do whatever you want.
Thank you. Tony Isabella. Black Lightning is a minstrel character. Terrible. Absolutely terrible.
Is he a mainstream guy?
Oh, yeah. Very active.
Yeah, relatively. He's like
big SJW.
Like B tier. Oh, I thought we were talking about Black Lightning. I would say Black Lightning is like a B tier DC character.
He's got his own TV show. He's still a B tier, all right? Yeah. I mean,
well, yeah. Why does he have a TV show? Is it because diversity is kind of popular right now in media? Do you think?
He has a TV show because DC Entertainment is strip mining all of their properties to find out, what they can create so that they can please HBO Max and AT&T. They need to keep these licenses, these trademarks always out there in order to maintain their trademarks. So you're going to be seeing more obscure DC characters. Why does Star Spangled Kid have a TV show? She's a white kid. She's, I don't know. It's more of this. Let's see what works. Let's see what kind of works right now. Black Lightning is not popular. It has never been popular. And I used to draw him a little bit. But yeah, anyway, I just wanted to make fun of Tony Isabella Croz. There's really nothing.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Let me be more direct with my question. Do you agree with the idea that when we look at television and film, it seems like more diverse casts that feature a higher number of minority compared to white cast members is kind of what's trendy in like television and film right now?
Yes, but that doesn't mean anything. That's what's going on in comics too, for the very same reasons. Okay, so why do you think it's successful in film, in other forms of media, but unsuccessful in comics?
Is it successful in other forms of media?
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm seeing gender swapped movies fail left end over right. We're watching, what was it? Charlie's Angels, new kind of angry feminist take, flopped. Terminator, gender swap, flop. Just one. James Bond.
Okay, but these are just
as a black woman, flop through.
This is where I'm talking about confirmation bias. Like, this isn't the overall data. Star Wars was like how much money did Star Wars make? Star Wars made like $1 trillion worldwide.
Well, no, the first one made $2 billion. And then it was a big, gigantic sloping decline. Now, of course, Star Wars is always going to do very well. Star Wars under Kathleen Kennedy's Solo was the first Star Wars movie to ever lose money.
Yeah.
And in that movie, it's women kicking Han Solo's ass and embarrassing him. And there's a feminist droid. It features a pansexual Lando Calrissian. And it's a ridiculous social justice warrior flop. And then, the end result of the diversity of Star Wars is the most successful toy franchise in history has been destroyed. They're not making any more Star Wars toys. This stuff all leads one direction.
You've mentioned confirmation bias a couple times, Croz. What exactly do you mean by that? What do you think? How are we using confirmation bias?
Okay, so for those who don't know, the term confirmation bias is when you have a tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information that supports your prior beliefs or values. Mm-hmm. So when you're asking me, is it true that like more diverse casts equal more dollars? Yeah, like we can use the UCLA's 2019 diversity report to see that films with casts that were 31 to 40% minority had the highest median box office, and films with 11% or less minority cast had the lowest median global box office. I can link you the PDF if you'd like. It's pretty interesting to see because they compare these numbers.
Please.
Sure, let me grab it.
So you're saying a more diverse cast is more money, and so I know that there are movies that have hugely diverse casts that are amazing movies. Guardians of the Galaxy, for instance, Into the Spider-Verse, for instance. Star Wars also has like the Rise of Skywalker has a very diverse cast. Two of those movies are awesome. One of those movies blows. Like, there's more that goes into a movie than just the diversity of the cast. Are you saying that that's the sole thing that makes a movie successful?
Well, no, I'm not talking from like a critically successful. I'm mainly talking just from financial success.
We're also talking about philosophical ideas, like jamming politics into movies. The Rise of Skywalker jammed a bunch of politics into a movie that Into the Spider-Verse didn't really reference politics. There was a diverse cast, but they kept the politics out of it. Same with Guardians of the Galaxy. Where are the politics in Guardians of the Galaxy?
And on the other hand, Adam, though, to make the counter argument, there's Captain Planet, which is the most diverse cartoon I've ever seen. Also the weirdest, and it was very successful, wasn't it? The guy was blue. He had a green mullet, half top, when he became a superhero.
Yeah, there you go.
He's brought pollution down to zero.
We also, Comicsgate doesn't really have anything against diverse casts. Like, I don't know.
It's not that. I don't know. It has nothing to do with that. And by the way, it's all about the intent of the creative person. And you can smell a social justice warrior right away, because diversity comes first. It's the first thought out of their head.
Yeah,
and representation. Representation. So then when the character, let's say that, hey, we're representing black female lesbians right now. Mm-hmm. This black black lesbian, left out the female part. This black lesbian is the most incredibly wonderful, flawless, amazing human being that you've ever seen. Makes no mistakes, smartest person in the room. And is always being validated by other people around her and herself. She looks in the mirror and says, "You're going to get him today." That is social justice. That is a shitty kind of thing. You see that in comics. Let's have a trans character, and then when your entire point is to include people because of their surface traits or their identity. And the whole reason you're introducing this character is because of their identity. And you're trying to make readers feel comfortable because they might be seeing themselves in this character. How in the world are you going to make a nice three-dimensional character? How are you going to make a villain? How are you going to make somebody who isn't very bright, a lovable fuck up? How are you going to make these characters, into real three-dimensional characters that are actually relatable? Rather than a statement about, hey, this character exists in a comic book. We look at Ms. Marvel, we look at these characters that were created. We look at Captain Marvel, my God. We look at these characters that exist solely to exist. And they are unlikable. They're perfect. They are what we call Mary Sues often. And they're disastrous. I mean, they end up with, people don't like them. People like Peter Parker, not because he's white. They like him because they can relate to his struggle. He's not perfect. He makes mistakes. One time he was greedy and selfish, and it resulted in the death of his uncle. These are things that people can understand and relate to. We like Bruce Banner because we understand what it's like to feel weak, to feel like angry at our weakness. And then to sometimes be afraid that we're going to let go and cause destruction. We can relate to that. We can't relate to Gogurt Hulk, this Asian kid who loves being the Hulk. It's awesome. It's radical being the Hulk. It's rad. These are characters that exist just to placate. It seems like it's almost, it really is sanctimonious. It's usually white creators, Marvel and DC, who are creating characters of ethnic diversity or sexual identity, diverse sexual identity, in order to placate an audience that they hope will come along. And they create characters that are utterly worthless. There is no character that these SJWs have created in the last 5 or 6 years that has any value at all. None. And they continue to try to force these characters. Ms. Marvel is a prime example. I mean, she's Muslim. Is that how to pronounce it, or is that's how Obama pronounced it? And people keep making fun of me. Muslim. She's Muslim. She's a girl. She's got the worst design costume I've ever seen, and her superpowers appeal to absolutely no one. And yet they're shoehorning this character every which way. By the way, why Her power is that her hands grow. I don't know any little girl who doesn't want her hands to get big. I don't know anyone. Little girls, that's their fantasy. They look at their hands and go, I wish I could palm a basketball. Who created this character? Sana Amanat created this character. Sana Amanat, mysterious force within Marvel Comics, knows Barack Obama, gave him the comic book with Spider-Man on it, featured him on it at the White House. That she was allowed to co-create a character from Marvel Comics, which is being shoehorned into every single aspect of media, of entertainment media. When you create a character from Marvel Comics, you own a piece of that character in terms of royalties. You want to know why this character truly exists? It's not to appeal to young Muslim girls. Sana Amanat has a piece of this character, and she's putting her in video games. She's putting her in movies. She's doing everything that she can with her authority at Marvel Comics in a very, I would say, corrupt manner to cash a paycheck for herself. Because that character has zero appeal. You're sitting there looking at the Marvel Comics fighting game, and it's like Incredible Hulk, and you get to see him fight. I want to be the Ms. Marvel, footage of Ms. Marvel, Spider-Man, Ms. Marvel, Captain America, Ms. Marvel again. This is clearly an effort. And you might look at it and mistakenly think that it is for reasons of trying to bring in young Muslim girls to Marvel readership. It might be kind of half-heartedly, but there's also some corruption in it, which I think is pretty interesting. What do you think of that, Croz?
I think this is something that's been studied in psychology quite a bit. The quote I wrote down for this was, portrayals of minorities in the media not only affect how others see them, but it affects how they see themselves. So to you as a white person, I can understand why, hey, there's this new Asian Hulk. Not for me. I don't really like him because he's not meant to appeal to you as like a 40-plus-year-old white man. But there probably are some Asian kids out there who maybe reading comics feel kind of left out because there aren't people that look like them. And when they read this, they're like, oh, this is a character I can actually make a connection with.
Well, I would say that I don't believe that that's true. I don't believe people, I don't believe that people like characters because they share the same skin color. I think that is a social justice warrior idea that is untrue, and it reduces people down to very, very basic elements of who they are and ignores who they actually are inside. I think people relate to Steve Rogers. Black people relate to Steve Rogers. They like Steve Rogers' Captain America. I like Shang-Chi. If we're talking about Asians, that's a real Asian character who has, his own personality and his own stuff going on. Asian Hulk is just a fake character. There's nothing there. There's no dimension to him. There's nothing in Asian Hulk. I don't even know what his name is anymore. I don't know, who cares? There's nothing there that makes him more interesting than Bruce Banner. His existence, when you create a character, you need to actually come up with some sort of inner conflict. When I co-created Jessica Cruz, Green Lantern, with Jeff Johns, the whole idea was that she was, afraid. She's afraid to leave her house. She's got a Green Lantern ring, and she is, what's that called when you don't want to leave your house? Agoraphobic.
Right.
And that's that fundamentally, that you built her character out from there, overcoming her agoraphobia to be able to use her ring.
Okay.
And she wasn't a nice girl. She was a mean girl, and she was Latina.
Do you think I was about to bring that up. Do you think it takes away from Jessica Cruz as a character at all that she's Latina? Or we can even use Simon Baz, the other Green Lantern that came out around that time, the Black Muslim guy.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the fact that Simon Baz, might have been part of Al Qaeda and walked away from it, was a guy who didn't want to use his ring, so he carried guns around with him all the time. He'd rather use guns. Do you think any of these things were insulting to people who look like him?
Well, I do remember that the initial issue where they introduced him, it was him like holding up two guns, and that definitely when I first saw it, shocked me. But when I actually read the comic and the content, I think that's a good example of representation where they explored, hey, as a Black Muslim, this is what it's like interacting with the criminal justice system. You can't really do that story with Steve Rogers, right?
No, I'm not. You're okay. You're not understanding me. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be Black Muslim characters. I'm simply saying social justice warriors don't know how to create them, and they've infiltrated the comic book industry. Jeff Johns does know how to create them. Jeff Johns creates characters who are imperfect, who do not flatter. Like if you're only looking at Simon Baz because of his skin color and his religion, if that's the only reason you're looking at him as a character, he doesn't flatter, that demographic at all. He's a real three-dimensional character. Social justice warriors have yet to create anything, anything that doesn't lick the rear end of the demographic that they're pretending to service.
Sure, I think
in their characters.
I think I understand the argument you're making now. Let me ask you this. What is it about Simon Baz or Jessica Cruz that you think makes them really good, fleshed out 3D characters that we can't extend to someone like Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel?
They have flaws. They have personality. They overcome adversity. They represent problems that the readers encounter and have. Problems often of their own making. Okay, it's not just the world sucks and I have to overcome it. No, these are flawed characters living real lives with tremendous powers, and the fantasy implicit, the fantasy inherent in that, I should say, is that we all have these problems. We all suffer from circumstances, trials, and the fantasy is, boy, I wish. This guy's kind of like me, or I wish I could be more like him. If I only had powers, maybe I could overcome this and do this that way. And, they're sophisticated stories about real people. And the only difference is they have superpowers. These characters exist in 3 dimensions. We know when a bad writer is, when a writer is writing a character incorrectly. When Logan is being written incorrectly. You cringe, don't you? You hate it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like that's kind of the beauty of comics, right? Is that sometimes you can get excited by things like, oh, John Romita Jr. is going to draw Superman. I'm really interested to see how that looks. Or Rick Remender is writing Captain America. I want to see his take and the themes he wants to explore with Captain America. But I think you can do that It's probably bad that I brought up Miss Marvel as an example because I haven't read a ton of the Kamala Khan stuff.
You're not alone.
Yeah, why is that? You're just not interested, huh?
Yeah, it just doesn't appeal to me.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, so
but its existence doesn't make me angry, or I don't think it's a bad thing, because there are people that it appeals to, and there's nothing wrong with that. And the stuff that I did read of Miss Marvel, I was like, hey, I think this is pretty fun. I think that if you're like a Zoomer or whatever, this is more in line with your personality. It's probably going to appeal to you in some way.
I don't understand why. I don't understand who she is. Let me ask you a question. Let's use Star Wars. I always talk about this. When it comes to creating characters, George Lucas was second to none. I could ask Adam. I could ask anyone in the audience. I could say, who's Han Solo?
Bad boy.
Tell me a little bit about Han Solo. Tell me about his personality and who he is. Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Chewbacca. Tell me who any of these characters are, and you can tell me who they are. Who's Poe? Who's Finn? Who's Rey?
Oh, no.
Do you understand? These characters do not have personalities. They do not have distinct personalities. They are not well-drawn characters. And the same thing is happening because they exist. They exist because one's a woman, one is Black, and one's Latino. And they're in Star Wars. That's entirely why they exist. That's why they were created. One was a stormtrooper once. Yes, but who is he? Apparently, he does not find Rose Tico as attractive as I do. That's the only thing I know about him. This is the problem. Same thing is happening in comics. We have a lot of flat characters that exist, were created to appeal to, marginalized people. in the hopes that marginalized people would come into comics. But none of these people who are creating these marginalized characters know how to create decent, inhabitable, believable characters that we want to share any time with. You know, if I knew Ray in real life, I couldn't wait to get away from her. I don't want to spend any time with Ray. I don't want to spend any time with that other dude who's the horse face guy, Darth Vader's protege. I don't want to spend any time with these people. I don't want to spend any time with Ms. Marvel. I do want to spend time with the classic characters created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby because they're really rich, well drawn meaning carefully thought through, defined. They exist. They're real people in your head when you're reading them. Social justice warriors can't do this. And the reason why they can't do it is because they're afraid of insulting the marginalized people that they're representing.
It sounds to me, and I was afraid this was going to happen, where we're kind of arguing along lines of this is what I like to read, and this is what I like to read. So this goes back to, I don't want, when I read a comic, I don't want it to be like, okay, I just want us to be going through the motions, and I want to like have my expectations met of what Captain America is. I want boundaries to be pushed. I want there to be new ideas. Like, how did you feel about the?
I don't think we don't like. Why do you seem to think that we don't care about that stuff? The conversation that I see us having is one about, for some reason, you believe that representation has become the responsibility of the comic book industry, where I always thought the responsibility of the comic book industry was to entertain as many people as they possibly could.
Well, I think we can chew gum and walk at the same time when it comes to this issue.
Evidently not, because a lot of these books seem to be like putting representation above good storytelling, which is the problem, which I would argue is why the comic book industry is failing. Yes, you are a person that does like to see heavy, ham-fisted representation shoved into comic books, but the declining numbers would indicate that you're a shrinking minority of people who are interested in their politics being preached to them from the pages of comic books.
Gail Simone created a shrinking minority that you might like. She made the Atom into an Asian kid. It got canceled, though. So you have to read it in the back issue, Ben.
Sadly, not familiar with
I'll
that
have
one.
to check it out.
I'm not arguing for ham-fisted. Like, I've tried to make the distinction of, I want good representation. That's why I pointed to Snowflake and
The question I'm asking is, which is more important? Because when did the comic book industry become the representation industry? Because a lot of people never envisioned that happening. They envisioned it as the entertainment industry.
Sorry,
like, I go to church to meet certain needs in my life. I don't go to church to be entertained. Okay. I go to comic books to be entertained. I don't go to comic books to be preached to.
Okay. Man, I feel like just what you guys read as this is preachy, to me, I would just read as, oh, cool. This is just something new that we otherwise wouldn't hear about if these characters weren't these kind of identities. Because I'm sure we can all agree that the life a black man lives in the U.S. is fundamentally different than the life a white person lives.
Right. So
not necessarily. That's not true.
Not necessarily, but probably on average, right?
I don't know. That is an assumption I think that people make. I don't think that you can define what kind of life somebody lives by the color of their skin. I mean, this is the whole thing. Well, like, you guys, you primarily identify people, based on sex, race, and sexual identity, and from there you make all kinds of assumptions about what people want and what they're looking for and who they are. And that is a huge problem with social justice warriors and what they bring to comics and entertainment.
And aren't you to some extent critiquing these books based more on representation than actual entertainment?
No, not necessarily. That's why I have no problem saying, like, yeah, Snowflake and Safe Space is fucking stupid.
Then why do social justice warriors? Why does Gail Simone have a career? Because she critiqued comic books on the way they represented women.
I'm not super familiar with that, so I can't really speak to that, unfortunately, because I'm not.
So Gail Simone basically critiqued comic books from a social justice perspective. She said the way comic books represent women are appalling and that we need to fix this. So she's judging comic books solely on how they represent people, on representation, which is a progressive issue, is it not?
Sure. Okay, I think I understand what we're talking about now. And I would point back to that idea of Steamboat Bill being some form of representation, but you could understand why maybe like a black reader would go, wow, this is really fucking offensive to me.
Yeah, correct. And the marketplace would sort that out. Right now, the marketplace is sorting out. We're arguing here. Right? Like you've never really clarified whether you agree that we all agree that the market is in decline. You have not clarified whether you think you're saying that the market is in decline because of other forces. We're saying the market is in decline because these progressive politics are circumventing good storytelling and catering to a smaller and smaller demographic. You're saying that, it depends upon, what the reader likes. If you're setting out to get
I think I've been fairly clear that to me, the reason it's failing is that this is just corporate greed that manifests itself in an oversaturated market, piss poor system of how we actually order comics through stores. And I think I agree. I don't think we're trying to put out a good product. I think we're just trying to make as much money as possible.
Are they turning to progressive politics in a very cynical way then? They're like, our numbers are down. We have to try something. The progressive politics are what we're going to try.
To me, I interpret it as the world is changing. And from my perspective, I think it's changing for the better that now that trans people and LGBTQ people have like representation, we're actually talking about their issues. And it's not that these issues didn't exist previously and just like
why is it the responsibility of the comic book industry though? That's my question.
It's no one's responsibility. I don't think people are being like having their hands tied and being forced to write LGBTQ characters that they don't want to write. There's evidence of the reverse where I know the Batwoman writers wanted to do a gay wedding for their character, and that was something they wanted to do. And the editor stepped in and said, no, you can't do this.
Okay. Because they're considering the audience.
Yeah, because like the public perception, like this was in 2013, then was, oh, well, gay stuff is kind of controversial. We probably just want to avoid that. And now 2019, 2020, times have changed and that stuff is trendy. So they're just chasing the dollar and saying, hell yeah, let's do more of that stuff. This is what people want to read.
We're going into an hour and a half or so.
The question that I want to put there on that one though, Croz, is you say that changes have occurred between 2013 and 2019, but the question is where? Because a change that occurs in the broader society may not have occurred among the specific demographic that these people are producing the product for. And I think that was the argument that Ethan has partly been making earlier on, that they're not taking into account that this is a specific audience. It's not a generalized audience that covers the entirety of Western Europe and North America. So, I mean, how would you respond to that? That there's a time lag, if you like, between the demographic that consumes this media and the general political understanding of what is acceptable in these regions.
Sure. I'm just trying to process your question. 1 second.
I really made it too wordy, didn't I?
It's okay. I think I generally understand what you're asking. Sorry, can you repeat the question? Actually,
yeah. I'll summarize. I'll boil it down properly.
Sure, that'd be great.
So you said just now that there's been a change between 2013 and 2019, in which people generally speaking have become more accepting of LGBT issues. Right. And so you would say that you would expect this to be reflected in the comics industry. But my question, in which I'm trying to sort of get Ethan back in there for this, is would you accept Ethan's explanation, if I'm understanding his earlier argument correctly, that the specific demographic who are actually consuming in the comic book industry have not moved forward in the way that you're describing?
Sure.
And so when this is presented again in 2019, the change has actually not been at the same pace. So you're actually not matching the change that you say has occurred.
Sure. I would say that when I look at media, I think it not only reflects our culture, but our culture is also a reflection of media, if that makes sense. I don't think there's a chicken or the egg for that. And I would say, to answer your question about potentially, while the world is changing, the comics audience isn't changing. I would say we don't really have data on that. Isn't that just speculation?
At least not isn't changing, but is at least changing at a slightly slower pace. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
to
sure.
Be
I think I recognize that. I think I worded that poorly. But is there like any hard data that shows, hey, this is the makeup of the identities of comics readers?
Brilliant question, but I think Ethan can probably has an answer to that. Do you? Like, how do you know what it is that this demographic actually wants?
I mean,
other than sales that you've already described, of course.
Yeah, I gotta say, I reject the whole premise that, like, look, comic readers are they're not coming along with society as it progresses. So we're resistant to progress. You're essentially calling comic book readership racist and Luddites.
That's not my intention. I swear.
Well, let me just say, it has absolutely nothing to do with any of that. It has nothing to do with showing gay characters. We've had gay characters in comics for as long as I've been reading them. It has nothing to do with showing more people of color. That's all been in comics as long as I've been reading them. Storm is a black woman with a shaved head who led the X-Men when I started reading comics, and I just went, cool, well, she deserves to because she's really smart. She was a well-drawn character. She was a very carefully conceived of, and they worked really hard to keep her characterization in place, so I believed she was real. And that's the whole thing. I don't believe any of these characters are real. Let me just put it to you that way. As a fan, somebody who could go back and be 13, 12 years old when I was reading comics and I believed these characters, I believed they were so carefully crafted that I believed in them and I wanted to know what they were doing every month. And that's how they got my 75 cents every month. What are Reed and Sue up to? How's Franklin doing? That's what sold me comic books. These characters are flimsy results of political activism. They are frauds. They're fraudulent. The creative people who are creating them are frauds. They're fraudulent. These characters exist to flatter a demographic that is not interested, that is not being flattered, that is not responding to their existence the way that social justice warriors flatter themselves that they might. That is the reason why comics are not selling right now, because all of these efforts are entirely political. This is all part of a social agenda. And it isn't working. It isn't working in comics because comic book fans and readers are smart. They're not bigots. They're smart, and they demand more dimensions. They demand reality with their fantasy. They will not be insulted by dumb creators who come in and just go, wow, look, we need more representation in comics. As soon as you say that, I know that what you're offering me is not genuine. As soon as you tell me what your agenda is, I don't buy it. You want to subtly put this stuff in my comics? Hey, look, North Star is gay, but we've known him for a long time and we know who he is. And oh, he's gay. Okay, cool. That kind of a thing, I buy that as a reader. I don't buy these deliberate attempts to subvert the comic book industry into some sort of weird. We're speaking to people based on their skin color. Nobody wants it. And it's just become clear at this point that the people who want it to exist and don't want to buy it. The people who are actually buying comics don't want it at all. They feel like it's an insult. And that is why we are where we are right now. And you notice that these...
Sorry, can I just interject?
Sure.
So the original question was, do you have any data to back the idea that, or I guess to represent what like the identity or races of comics reader looks like? How do we know what the actual comic audience looks like?
Because we go to comic book conventions and we meet them all the time, and it doesn't really matter. At one point comics were selling, and now they're not. And
it sounds like you're making the argument that like the comic book readers are a bunch of racists and they can't take representation.
Oh, I'm sorry. that's not the argument I'm trying to make at all.
Well, we know the comic book is declining. We've all the comic industry is declining.
All in
We've all
agreement on
agreed
that.
to that.
We're
So
just I think we're just disagreeing on what the contributing factors are.
Right. Yes, we think that it's progressive politics being shoved into comic books and turning off longtime readers. And you have not really said what you think it is. Oh,
No,
I guess
I've said oversaturated
competition.
market. It's just not a fun hobby to do now, right?
Mhm.
Like the market.
I wonder
sucks.
why.
Well, I would argue that it's
Used
like
to be.
it's expensive. Yeah, but times change, right?
No, people ruin
some
shit.
hobbies go
Social
people
justice
ruin
warriors
it.
ruin shit.
Wait,
They make
okay.
fun things not fun. They've turned comic books into a platform for them to hector and lecture normal people. We're talking about weird, mentally ill people who want to use comics as a lectern to lecture normal people that were just having fun reading about Spider-Man. Fuck these people. They need to get out of here. They're killing this business. They're killing this hobby.
They turned it into the church of representation over an entertainment industry. That's what I would argue.
These guys think they're fighting
on your side, Adam and Ethan. Would you say that the position you've taken might have been seen as less controversial than it actually has been received as, if the message that had been sent out at the start was that you all are concerned about the dimensionality of these characters and the fact that
we've said that over and over again.
That's all they've ever said.
Right. The thing is, social justice warriors have the microphone. So they go, they listen to our reasoned arguments and they say it's because they're bigots. They're racist.
Yes.
They hate women. They're the ones who get to spread that poison into the mainstream in order to silence us because they don't actually care. You understand? They don't really care about the sustainability and profitability of the comic book industry. They care about what they've done. They've implanted themselves like ticks and parasites in this fun hobby. They're poisoning it with their politics, and they don't want us to stop them. So we're bigots and racists.
I would put one other question to you then, and I'll go back to Croz and have him respond, of course.
I want to be mindful of Ethan's time. We're like in an hour and a half, so just
okay. How much time do we have left?
I'm not sure. I'm we're good.
Okay. Good.
Before you came on here, obviously, since you're one of the big names that's always mentioned when comicsgate is brought up, Ethan, I sort of went and looked for any articles that contained your name on the Washington Post. So I kind of went through and I could see a common theme emerging, not of you specifically committing some offense, but rather people who claim, we're talking about people in comment sections of Twitter and stuff like this, people who claim to be aligned with you committing some kind of offense toward perhaps some content creator or someone in the industry, and then that person then responding to this by saying this is what the people who refer to themselves as being comicsgate are doing, and Ethan is responsible. So I mean, what would you say to the people out there who may have taken the argument that you've made here, the one which sounds, quite reasonable about the dimensionality of characters and so on, and they've kind of disregarded part of your argument and, sort of gone out harassing people? Would you say to those people that they need to stop doing this in your name because it's actually making you look bad?
Who's doing that?
There's no way I could
Nobody's doing anything in my name. And as far as I've seen, comicsgate, which look, we were mouthy in 2017 and 2018 because that's when the problem really started to it's a little bit like an exorcism. It's like as soon as you start to say those words, Reagan, not Ronald Reagan, but little Reagan in her bed starts spinning her head around and vomiting pea soup, and that's what 2017 and 2018 looked like. It was the beginning of the exorcism. That was, initiated by Diversity in Comics and other comic skaters who were identifying the problem, putting words to it, pointing out prime examples of individuals who were responsible for it. And the response to that was to call everyone harassers, to misconstrue criticism as harassment. While this was going on, these same people, these same social justice warriors were actively trying to destroy our lives. While they were calling us a harassment campaign and all of this stuff because we were saying, stop with the politics in comics. This is killing. It's going to kill comics. They were finding out where we worked. They were finding out our kids' names. They were contacting our work. They were trying to get us fired. They harassed me endlessly. They harassed Richard C. Meyer. Thought he worked at PayPal. They contacted PayPal to get him fired. They got his Patreon taken down. They did everything they could. They reported his YouTube channel to stop his criticism. And he, in frustration, in a private video, called one of them a cum dumpster because she called him a white supremacist, which is just not true. And that became, he hates women. He called this poor woman a cum dumpster. Oh my goodness. I will tell you something. I told Richard felt bad about this because he's a normal person who has a conscience. I said, this woman organized in private to destroy your life and paint you as a white supremacist, which both of us find to be a disgusting thing. We don't believe in white supremacy. So to be tarred as a Nazi and a white supremacist is the lowest thing you can do to somebody. It is destroying their reputation. And this woman did everything to make it so that you were unemployed, unemployable, called you a white supremacist, tried to make people think that you were a racist, and you responded by calling her a whore. You could have called her anything you wanted to, and you don't need to apologize for that, ever. Ever. And the poor guy still feels bad about it. I shouldn't have said that. You can call people who treat you that way however you want. They have control with the left-wing media. We don't go, let's write articles about, what's gone wrong in comics. We don't do that. They write articles seeking to destroy us, to silence us. And now if you look up my name, you'll find articles in, Daily Beast, the Miami Herald. You'll find articles mentioning my name, implying that I am racist and that I am the leader of a harassment campaign. These are all pointed efforts to make it so that my life is never going to be the same again, because I stood up against, far left-wing activists in comic books. An entirely frivolous thing, but it means everything to me because it's where I derive my living. These people destroyed my life over it. So, what do I say to any of this? It's nonsense. If we were given an equal platform to talk to these people and actually have a debate like we're doing tonight, we would obviously blow these people away. We've been right about everything. In return for that, in return for trying to rescue this hobby, we will forever be tarred as racist, as sexist, as bigots, as harassers. That's going to be associated with my name for the rest of my life because of this. Because I cared enough about comics to see where they were going wrong and to try to fix it. It ended my career in comics and destroyed my reputation, but I don't regret it at all. Not at all. I would do it again the exact same way because I love comic books. I insist that comic books and comic book creators be allowed to flourish. Without harassment, without being afraid of political consequences for the things they say, do, and believe, and who they are. Comics are for everyone. That includes Republicans. Comic books are absolutely for everyone. And if you have the talent, you should be allowed to work wherever you want. Even if you don't have the talent, you should be allowed to make comic books. So I'm proud as hell of comicsgate. We've withstood a withering barrage of abuse for criticizing the monsters that, in my opinion, destroyed these characters that we inherited. It was our responsibility to steward. They destroyed them. These characters have existed for 80 years. They used to tell me at DC Comics, they'd say, you can bend a character, but don't break the character. You can bend a character. You can say, put them in a weird situation. Where they
change it.
You do not break they broke Captain America, Ray. They said he was a Nazi. He's been a Nazi his entire existence. That's called breaking a character. That's what social justice warriors did. Now, what does that mean?
Really strange.
Wait. What was social justice or like identity warrior? Or sorry, what was social justice warrior or identity politics about that story arc?
Because the person who wrote it was so angry that Donald Trump was elected president, he no longer recognized his country and took it out on Captain America. Captain America must also reflect his personal political angst over the country that he claimed he no longer recognized, and therefore Captain America must have been a Nazi all along too. It was insanity. Captain America now, if you've been collecting Captain America...
I have to interrupt. So if I just read the comic and didn't do any digging into the author's backstory, who wrote this? Do you know like the author of this by hand? What was it called? It was called Secret Empire, I think.
Yeah, Secret Empire. Look up that guy's name.
Yeah, who was the author of this? If I had just it was written by Nick Spencer, who sounds familiar. If I just read this, would I know? Oh, this is an anti-Trump message.
I don't know how you could miss it. He's saying America, the representative, the vanguard of this country and everything it stands for and everything that it's always been, has always secretly been working for Hydra, which is the stand-in for the Nazi Party in Marvel Comics, and has always been. And so if you've been collecting Captain America for 80 years, if you've been collecting Captain America at all, you can go back now and read your old back issues knowing that it was all a lie. The character that you're reading there was just pretending to be an American. He was a Nazi all along. That's called breaking a character. Throw your Captain America comics away. And how did they fix it? The characters all together got together and made a wish that Captain America was the Captain America we always thought he was. And then that character appeared. And so there's a fake Captain America running around who represents the delusions of the Marvel Universe. They're destroying these characters, Croz. They're destroying them. Some of the most important characters they've destroyed.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that does sound like an act of destruction. Like, what do you think of that, Croz?
Well, I think that this is a shitty trope of comics that has existed since the death of Superman and has nothing to do with identity politics. And I mean, I loved Secret Empire. I thought it was pretty cool, again, because we were like pushing boundaries. It was in line with Superior Spider-Man, Superior Iron Man, the new Thor, where it's like, fuck it, fuck the status quo, let's just do something different. And I feel like this is just my interpretation, but it sounds like you're projecting your dislike of this author onto his work, because I don't think your average person reads this and says, oh, this is an anti-Republican message.
I have no problems with Nick Spencer personally at all. I don't dislike him. I have no problems with him, but he fucked up. He put his own agenda ahead of his responsibility and stewardship of a character that has existed since 1941 and has thrived and has a fan base that is enormous. Now, he did this while the Avengers movies and Captain America movies were making billions of dollars at the box office. So that people coming out of the movie theater who just saw Steve Rogers beautifully portrayed, want to read some Captain America comics, stumble right into this storyline where he's been a Nazi all along. The irresponsibility of these people in there, I have something to say. These characters do not belong to you. They don't belong to you. They belong to everyone. They belong to the world. And your responsibility is to hand them off to the next generation of creators in as good a shape as you got them, if not better, staying true to the purpose of the character, what they always meant, what they're saying. Social justice warriors don't give a shit. Not a shit. They killed Tony Stark. They killed Bruce Banner. They're killing off all of these kind of white male archetypes in Marvel Comics, characters that are extremely popular now in other media. And they're replacing them with fake diversity stand-ins.
Hey, I got to ask, because I haven't read this story arc, but so is Steve Rogers in Avengers Endgame really a secret Nazi? Like he's just like
in the movie? Yeah, he would be.
Yeah, in the movie.
He would be. If you follow the comic
book
content.
Like he's sitting on the bench in the end of the movie, and you're like, that dude's a fucking Nazi.
Yeah.
Well, comic continuity and like the movie continuity is obviously different, but the movies are very much drawing from more recent comics. Like that ending scene where the Falcon kind of becomes Captain America, like that was 2015, right?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm just saying Avengers Endgame is quite a different movie if you know that Captain America
Sure,
I don't think in the movie.
I don't think in movie canon that he's a Nazi. Oh, okay. Even in the comics, like he became an old man. They're literally just ripping off these comics from 2015.
Okay, so there's different.
This is why the audience is fleeing. I mean, this is it. You know, that is an insult. It all sounds trivial. You know, I feel weird talking about comics sometimes with people. I think the audience might not even be comic book fans, so they might be like, "You're arguing over kids' comics." Yeah, I know. Just pretend this matters for those of you. Pretend that you've been reading comics for 30 years and you're an enormous Captain America fan. Okay, and you've been collecting. You invested a lot of your time and money in a really nice collection of Captain America books, and you never miss an appearance of his. And then some snotty SJW who is butthurt over the election and wants to take it out on the avatar of America within Marvel Comics, announces that Captain America has been a Nazi all along, and then they kill him. Imagine what that does to you. I mean, that's infuriating. That has got to be an absolutely infuriating thing. And who's responsible for it? Not just the writer. The editorial team is also responsible. Fire all of these people into a brick wall from a trebuchet as hard as you can. Even better, trebuchet them into an oncoming train. These people all need to be fired and removed. At DC Comics, when we were handed The Flash or Green Lantern, it was always with incredible reverence. I would go back and read the first 5 issues to try to understand where the creative team initially was coming from, and then try to keep my version of Green Lantern or The Flash as true to that as I could, because that's what matters. That's how to keep this character fresh, new, and in good shape. None of this is mine. It doesn't belong to me. It's somebody else's. I don't have any right to hurt it or ruin it or damage it. It's been entertaining people since 1959. I got to make sure that it continues to entertain people, my grandkids.
Okay,
it's so irresponsible. It's just,
with Secret Empire, it was one of the
here quickly, Croz, before you
Sure.
come back in as
Sure,
well.
go ahead.
I mean, I think that Ethan was being a little bit self-deprecating there when he said that it's just comic books pretend it's important. I mean, I would say that it seems to me that this industry actually does have a sort of a real cultural value to it, because you can hear in the way that he talks about it and in the length of time being established here that this is actually a fixture in North American culture, right? So I mean, would you say, Croz, that there does need to be more care taken when dealing with what are basically cultural properties that existed for greater than 50 years? I mean, to me, it does seem like there's a gravity to this, even though obviously I'm not like an expert on any of this myself. I'm just the moderator. But is it not the case that there's a gravity on this where you can't just willy-nilly change things because of the history behind them?
I love Ray. You're supposed to be on his side. I love how we've completely won you over.
No,
Side of the argument.
She's the moderator.
I'm balanced. I'm on neither side.
She's doing her job. So before I answer that, I just wanted to bring up that I don't understand why we'd fire the Secret Empire creative team when they wrote one of the best-selling comics of the year. When did Secret Empire come out? I think it was 2016. Oh, 2017. Yeah, it was one of the best-selling comics of 2017. Now, I can appreciate that you didn't like it, but it seems like when I look at like the scores from IGN, it was kind of all over the place. Yeah, I do agree that like the switch where, oh, we'll just wish away Captain Rogers was dumb, but that's not social justice. That's not identity politics. That's just like a dumb thing from comics. Like I'm bringing up where we had the death of Superman, but now every character dies and they just come back in a year. That kind of cheapens comics, but that's not an identity politics thing. That's not a social justice warrior thing. This is a dumb comic trope that's been around since the 90s. Do you disagree at all with that?
Yes, I think that getting a comic book to sell by debasing the character in an ultimate final way is no great honorable feat, and it's nothing to be proud of. If they destroyed Superman and who he was in some fundamental way, people would buy it because it would be a freak show and it would be very, very sad. People would want to buy it because they couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe this was happening. I think that's what happened with Secret Empire, which was marketed to be one of DC's most important crossover events of the year. And therefore, a lot of eyes were on it, and a lot of people approved, seemingly, ostensibly approved of what they were publishing. And what they were publishing ultimately destroyed who Captain America was and always has been. So I don't know that being proud that series sold really well is something to boast about in this case. And as for the death of other characters, that's trivial superhero stuff. That's not a big deal. Killing off any random character in the comic book universe, letting them die and then bringing them back, like they did Barry Allen in 1985, and then we brought him back for Flash Rebirth. He still stayed in character. He's always been Barry Allen. He died an honorable death, and we brought him back as Barry Allen. He behaves like Barry Allen, the Flash. We stayed true to who he was.
Sure, I understand that from your perspective, but can you understand that for people like me, it kind of cheapens the overall death, or like the original event where the character died? Because it's usually built, like, they're never, when you read the comic, they're not like, oh, don't worry, guys, Superman's going to be back in a year. It's treated like, oh, yeah, he's gone forever.
Flash was dead for 25 years. I think we let him, that death lasted for 25 years.
Yeah, and it should have been permanent. I guess I'm just critiquing a trope at this point that I disagree with.
Okay.
I guess this is a subjective thing, but I do want to answer Ray's question about should there be some kind of obligation for, I guess, creative teams to try and maintain these characters as they exist. And my answer would be, I think anytime someone does something new and ambitious with a character or a series, in their mind's eye, they're honoring the original idea or what that character is to them in some way. I don't think anyone is going out here like, oh, I'm being tasked to write Spider-Man. Well, I fucking hate Spider-Man, and it's gonna be the worst series you've ever read. You're gonna fucking hate Peter Parker by the time I'm done with it. It's just, that's maybe a story they've wanted to write about Spider-Man that you might not like, but other people like. And I think that's one of the great things about art, is that we can both read the same comic, come up with different interpretations, and neither of us are necessarily wrong. Does that make sense?
No, because there are bad comics that people write, and that's out of a lack of ability, or just it was a poor idea. It wasn't a very well conceived story, and those come and go without doing too much damage. We're talking about awful shit that's being done in the name of far left wing politics. We're talking about a group of activists who come into comic books not to create great stories, but to fight the patriarchy, who see the audience of comics as, quote unquote, the oppressor, who they're here to fight. All stories that come from that kind of position, from that kind of standpoint, that grow from that seed are going to be poisonous and are going to strangle the characters that they touch. And are ultimately going to destroy the entire industry, as we're seeing happen now. I'm glad COVID's here. So it's in a way COVID isn't a good thing, Adam. Let me surprise you. You're thinking COVID-19 is awesome. It's not that great, because it's allowing these social justice warriors an excuse to say, well, the reason why comics are shrinking now is because of the pandemic, when manifestly that's not true. The reason why DC, it's fantastic that Jim Lee came out and said, hey, 25% of our line loses money. Holy shit, that's not the pandemic. Not when he's also saying
totally
that 3 Jokers sold 300,000 copies. The audience for good comics is there. Jim Lee sitting there saying, recognizing, by the way, that these same problems about diversity and low sales because there isn't enough diversity don't seem to be occurring in the manga audience, in the manga community, in which comic sales are through the roof right now. And Jim Lee's actually indicating in this article that that's where DC is going to. DC is going to start trying to produce manga. He's sitting there saying, we're going to try to make it culturally, seem like it's the real thing. It's going to be manga and YA. That's the future of DC Comics right now. The American superhero comic is dead. It's dead because of, I guess, well-meaning people who came in here and just, look, some people like this and some people like that. Like Croz is saying, that's not what happened at all. Crazy far left wingers came into comic books with an agenda to change them, to take over the industry, and to use comics as a platform to debase the audience, which they consider to be the oppressor, like I said, the patriarchy, mostly men, and to use the corpse of the comic book industry from which to telegraph their stupid politics. And that is what killed comics. That's where we are today. anytime social justice warriors invade any hobby or industry, the same thing's going to happen. You're looking at Star Wars, no longer sells toys. You know, their movies are beginning to shrink in box office receipts. Whenever social justice breaks into anything, it destroys it. I mean, it's just count on it. Name one thing that social justice, one entertainment, Doctor Who. The fans are fleeing from Doctor Who right now. All of it's just devastated. For what?
I have a bunch of super chats to read. Ray, it feels like we're coming to a close. Do you want to do any kind of closing statement, Croz?
Yeah, I can do a closing statement if you'd like.
Yeah, closing statements do need to happen because otherwise it's not, the plan. So yeah, following the plan, yes, everyone does need to do a closing statement. Roughly 3 minutes again, because that's the magic number. But obviously, I think you should do super chats first, Adam, or do you want to do them after?
No, let's do closing statements and then we'll do super chats. If there's
Sure,
questions in the super chat, we can answer them.
Yeah, that seems logical to me. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I think our argument that social justice politics are the predominant cause of the drop in sales of comic books have not really been contested. I don't see how you could make an argument that it's COVID related when these drops in sales have been happening long before the pandemic ever hit. Like Croz has made an argument, I feel, that shows he's more interested in representation in comics than the comics being entertaining. We never even touched on the fact that feminists are out to rid comics of characters that entice the male gaze. Various comic book themed movies have come out recently trying to battle this male gaze that seems to be a terrible plight on human society. I don't know how you can entertain an audience when you are going to jam all of these progressive politics in front of them in a preachy way. Now, I don't want to make the argument that like these things must be in every single comic. Like every comic must entertain the male fantasies of the way women should look, or should have all white people or no white people or all black people or all just the perfect mix of character combinations. I think comics should be able to have whatever is going to appeal to the widest audience. I think we all cohere around what many times even Marvel and DC and the various comic book movie producers have called the modern mythologies of our time. These are important things. These are important touchstones, as Ray has pointed out, in our culture, and that's why it is such a battleground over them. But I don't think turning comic books into a platform for progressive politics above good storytelling is doing anybody any services, and I think it's the main reason why people are turning away from Marvel and DC and Image, even from politically themed comic books. So that's my closing statement. I'll turn it over to, I'll let Croz have the last word. Go ahead, Ethan.
Okay. Well, I guess in closing, I would like to emphasize my personal affection for comic books. That I base my life around them. It's important to me that comic books succeed, comic books thrive, and the people who produce them are able to make enough money to feed their families. And that hasn't been the case recently. We're watching, people's paychecks decline, and we're watching the comic book industry in its last legs. It makes me very, very sad because I don't think it needs to be this way. I really don't. Now we're listening to people who, it's like, well, they meant well. These people they're all about their motivation. We meant to do the right thing here. We meant to just represent people. Its motivation is way more important than the consequences. The consequences are tons of mom and pop businesses are going out of business. Comic stores are closing down at a rapid pace. Characters that have withstood World War II, the Vietnam War, and all the changes in America all of the chaos, the chaotic changes of the 1960s. These characters survived, withstood all that, and could not withstand the Trump presidency and the irresponsible children who worm their way into this industry to complain, essentially, to beat up these characters. It makes me very, very sad. On the other hand, the positive side of this is that comicsgate exists, and quite comicsgate is the answer to all of this. Comicsgate allows creative people to do comic books unhindered by social justice warriors. We don't have to answer to anyone. People who do comics here are finding a way to kind of subvert the mainstream and all of the obstacles that you find there. I'm proud to be a part of comicsgate. I think it's the future of comics. I think it is. I think independence is the future of comics. I don't think these big corporations have figured out a way to withstand or answer the pressures of social justice warriors. I guess that's all I want to say. I said most of what I wanted to say already, but yeah, I'm angry about a lot of this stuff. I'm genuinely angry about it. That's why I talk about it every single day.
Okay, I guess that goes over to me. Before I begin, I just wanted to thank Adam again for hosting this lovely conversation, and Ray for moderating, and Ethan for joining. I appreciate all of your time. To me, if you love comics, and when you guys say, hey, I like comics or I love comics, I believe you. I think you're being sincere. But to me, if you love comics, you should want as many people to be reading comics as possible. And that doesn't necessarily mean we just appeal to the same old base over and over again. And it means expanding who we market and advertise to include more diverse groups. And that might lead to stories that you don't like, and that's totally fine. You don't have to read them. Just understand that for some people, they really do like those stories, and there's nothing wrong with that, because at the end of the day, your enjoyment of comics are subjective. There's no objectively good or bad comics.
All right, I guess I'll read some super chats. We have Jimmy Samimi for $5 says, can't stay. I've got to work tomorrow. Love you, Adam. I'll watch this tomorrow. Good night. Good night, Jimmy. Jimimi. DCBTXK for $4.99 says, the fact that it exists is a success for SJWs. Actual success doesn't matter. Do you want to respond to that, Crox?
What does he mean by success doesn't matter?
I think he's saying basically that the ultimate goal is to turn comics into a platform for social justice, that even if the books don't sell, just the fact that you have these established characters giving the middle finger to people that they perceive are against representation in comics is a win for them.
Okay, sure. I think that's a totally fair question. I would just point out that there are plenty of these so-called social justice comics that do sell incredibly well, and the ones that don't sell are canceled, and that's how it should be. We'll let the readers and the market decide, and people can vote with their wallets.
Harry Burgeon for $5 says, go to Disneyland. If it was open, you'd see black and brown kids with Captain America costumes on and white kids with Black Panther masks. So he's saying representation is not really all it's cracked up to be.
Okay. Yeah, I don't necessarily think that if you're a black person, you can only like black characters or vice versa. There are some people that just like looking at people that look like them, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just basic human psychology.
Okay. Somehow I think if we said that there's some white people that just like looking at white people, you'd call that white supremacy. But
no, I'm very disappointed that this is the view you have of me after this conversation.
Well, no, I shouldn't take it out on you, Crox. You're right. But there is a sustained argument against comicsgate that comes at it from that angle, that wants to conflate the arguments that we're making here today with very distasteful things. So I hope you understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah, for sure. Even though I don't agree with your guys' worldview, I can appreciate it, and I don't think you guys are bad faith actors at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
What would you say? Could you steel man our worldview? Like, do you understand really the argument that we're making? Yeah, I'm curious, because you said you don't agree with our worldview, but I'm not sure you really even understand our worldview.
I would steel man the comicsgate worldview as I just want good writing, good comics, and I'm afraid that these social justice warrior and identity politics based comics are superseding that drive to have actual good quality storytelling for nebulous things, let's say, and the quality of the comics is being sacrificed for that.
Well, that's great.
Fair?
No, yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, that's good. We're making some progress. I like this. Renault for $20 says Riri Williams is a black girl. She's a horrible character. Judging people by the color of their skin isn't instead of their character is racist. Croz advocates doing that. Riri is a terrible among many other diverse characters. Do you want to respond, Croz?
Yeah, that guy sounds like a fucking moron.
Do you like Riri Williams, the character? She's the Iron Man character, correct?
Ooh, I haven't read any new of her,
okay,
but
so
I can guarantee you when I go and do read it, my first thought won't be, well, what color of this character's skin will be. I'm just going to try and judge the comic on the narrative if it's good or not.
Do you understand? Do you understand kind of the bind that you get in though with a character? Like if your goal is to represent, to show black characters in a good light, do you understand how that limits your ability in making that character suffer or give them flaws, which is a common part of storytelling?
Yeah. Oh man, this is something that I think Ethan talked about, and I forgot to respond to, but I do agree that sometimes I think authors, I don't know if this comes from like the authors or the editorial team or if it's both. I definitely do agree with that idea that sometimes people are afraid to take risks if they're writing minority characters. But I think like there are notable exceptions as well. Like I would point to Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz.
Thank you.
Harry Bergeron for $5 says you'd see it as preachy if your point of view was put into the mouths of the villains only like they do it right now. So he makes a great point. So if the comics, if all the villains in the comics were, let's say, gay characters, wouldn't that be a noticeable thing to you, Croz? Like if every single villain was a trans character, wouldn't that be noticeable to you?
Yeah, I agree. I think it would bother me. Well, I don't know if bother is the right word, but it would definitely make me question, okay, what was the author's motivation for making these villains trans? What are they trying to say here? But I mean, I love Mark Miller, and he wrote Superman Red Sun, which was like a pretty clear critique of the USSR and communism. And even if I didn't agree with like the base politics of that story, still found lots to appreciate. I fucking love Red Sun.
You have no criticism of the USSR?
No, I do. Like, it's just, oh, sorry, I should clarify. I'm a liberal now, but I was formerly like a very far leftist. So at the time when I read Red Sun, I probably was like a little bit of a communist. Not that way now, but I just read Red Sun and went like, oh, I don't agree with that. Whatever. It just didn't bother me. I don't know what to tell you.
Renault for another $20. Thank you so much, Renault, man. That's very generous of you. Croz is talking about good representation, but then ignores that most of these diverse characters are bad. Has he read any of these all new, all different comics? Has he ever talked to a minority about comics? I bet not. So have you done any of that stuff?
Yeah, so I'm going to assume this guy didn't hear me when I said I used to work in a store, but I would guarantee I've talked to more people that read comics than he has in his entire lifetime, just on the basis of that alone.
What was the demographic coming into the comic book store? Was it mostly white male? Was it mostly?
Well, you know, that question is going to be impacted by where I live, right?
Sure, totally.
But I would say one thing I noticed was for people that, you know, have subscription services to our store, they were like at least 35 and plus. There were not a lot of young readers in the comic books industry.
Okay.
And I'd say they're probably majority white, but that's the city I live in.
Leroy, these names, for $5 says, do you have any data from a left-leaning educational institution? That's the only thing I will believe. I think he's.
Yeah, I get what he's trying to do.
Yeah, he's poking fun at you asking us.
Yeah, fuck data and science. Am I right? Science.
No, we are fully in favor
of what we feel.
Well, Richard Myers, Diversity in Comics, who inspired a lot of these people, was looking at data all the time. I mean, he was the one that was kind of chronicling the decline in comic book sales. So, and we all agree that the comic book sales have declined. So that would be the data I would reference.
Right, but my problem is we're putting the cart before the horse. It feels like, sure, there's a correlation between a decline in comics or a decline in sales and maybe what feels to you guys like more of a push towards these SJW storylines, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the cause, right?
Well, I would say that the culture has
that's just pure conjecture.
Well, the culture has been gripped by social justice politics. And I think those people naturally who gravitate towards that kind of politics, they want to make comic books too. They do make comic books, but they're making comic books for people who aren't really interested in comic books. So that's why they never sell. It's kind of like you don't have an Iron Maiden and a Britney Spears concert because people who listen to Britney Spears generally hate Iron Maiden.
Sure, but you can have a label and you can have both Britney Spears and Iron Maiden signed to that label and just make as much money as possible.
Sure, but
there's no label that's like we exclusively do hip hop because we're afraid people will go, oh, it's Def Jam Records.
I understand. Yes,
put out by them.
You separate the two and you do two different concerts, right?
No, well, I mean, this is the thing. Like you're talking about, like, look, there's a group of people who want to do experimental jazz. And then there's another group of people, you know, we're going to put them like on the same label as, you know, Britney Spears or something like that. Justin Timberlake, one of the big, huge pop stars. Experimental jazz. Have you ever heard like good experimental jazz, Adam?
Never. I hate jazz.
No, that's right. Experimental jazz is even worse. Everybody wants to do it because everyone thinks they can. It's shit. Yeah. And everyone likes, you know, when I say everyone, the majority of people, the mainstream likes Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears music. That music's going to sell a ton, you know. So, you know, experimental jazz is what social justice warriors essentially are. Everybody wants to make it. Everybody wants to say that they want it out there, but nobody wants to buy it. Nobody wants to actually pay money for it. I don't think social justice warriors want to pay money for their own stuff. It's just garbage. It's just trash. That's why it just sits on stands. And like I said earlier, I mean, this is the worst time for this kind of a phenomenon to come about. Like right when the back issue market is dead, comic books have a 2-week lifespan on the stands before they are utterly worthless. It's just devastating to retailers. I was saying the other day on Twitter, I said there are 1,900 Diamond accounts. And a retailer spoke up and said there are 1,120 now, Ethan. Those are retailers. Those are people buying comics from Diamond. And he's like, I know that gives you a hard on. I'm like, how dare you? I care about the retailer community.
And again, you think that COVID had nothing to do maybe with those retailers closing down?
I think no. I think for 2 months? No, of course COVID did. But the problem is they didn't have savings. You know, a lot of people are able to kind of weather this because their business is so successful that they're able to put money in the bank. The retailer community is living hand to mouth right now, trying to stay afloat so that when COVID happened 2 weeks and they're out of business, they're closing their doors.
Okay. Do you think that's a problem with SJWs or
yes.
a problem with how our government and economy function right now?
No, I think it's SJWs not
Okay.
giving them a product that they can sell. It's as simple as that. It has nothing to do with government and whatever the hell. It has to do with this. We're hot dog salesmen here in Comicsgate. We provide a product that everybody wants. And I always make this analogy. I'm like, here's the situation. We're small, you know, we're just a little hot dog cart. Like Cyberfrog's just a little hot dog cart. But I'll tell you something. If McDonald's decided to replace their beef patties, assuming they were beef, with soy, they want to make soy patties for everyone. They want to make veggie hamburgers instead of producing meat. And they said, we're doing it for your own good. We're doing it because it's good for people, and people should. People would. I would set up my hot dog stand right in front of that McDonald's, and I would be selling those all beef dogs. Adam, hand
People
over
would be
fist.
buying them.
I would destroy a big corporation. I would be able to destroy the entire McDonald's corporation. I'd be able to beat them with my little hot dog stand because I'm producing a product that people want. That tastes good. It's what people are in the mood for. And McDonald's is fucking up by producing something that nobody wants, that feels like a punishment. When you're eating a soy patty, it feels like a punishment. When you're reading an SJW comic book, it feels like a lecture and a punishment. It feels abusive.
It feels
like getting your
movies too. It stands out like a sore thumb, man. My
and
wife
you know what
and
those stand out like.
Yeah. My wife and I, every time the social justice politics come into a movie, like we look at each other like, oh, here's the preachy part. Here's the part where we're in church. I think if the social justice activists could force people into the social justice churches, they would, but they don't have that luxury. People don't want that. So they are forcing it into comic books instead. Renault for another $5. Oh no, 200 Watt Studio for $2 says, what about G.I. Joe and Sitterson? Is that a
Oh yeah. Well, you know, look, Aubrey Sitterson is a fellow. He's a socialist, like Croz is. He's a communist, dirty communist, and he.
Sorry, I stopped to interrupt. I'm a capitalist.
Okay, good.
But I was a communist, and I saw the light.
Good. We're trying to make you see the light here too. This guy, you know, he got himself a job on G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe is a very small dedicated base, like 5,000 to 6,000 people are going to buy G.I. Joe books, but they meet up in their private rooms. They love G.I. Joe. Aubrey Sitterson, who was in SJW, decided he was going to get this job just to fuck with them. And that's what SJWs do. It's like, I'm going to make G.I. Joe. I'm going to imply that they're all gay. I'm going to imply they're into rough trade. I'm going to do covers. I'm going to allow covers where they're all kind of wrestling and have enormous bulges in their, you know, in the front of their pants. They're bent over and stuff on top of each other. And then I'm going to make it so that G.I. Joe can hire fat trans Eskimo women. And literally that's what he did. I mean, there was suddenly this overweight, brown skin. By the way, it's not black. It's not Latino. White SJWs have invented something called brown. It could be black. Person could be. It's just brown. Who really knows where these people come from or their ethnic origin? It's just not white. Is essentially they create these kind of fake ethnicities for their comics. And then he started insulting people about 9/11. He started yelling at people saying you don't have a right to mourn 9/11 if you weren't in New York. This guy works for Hasbro. He's working on G.I. Joe. I mean, he's a real American hero. And I said to one of the writers of Bleeding Cool in private, I said, why is it so important to you guys? Why are you fighting us? You know this guy should lose his job. Comicsgate is saying this is a guy who needs to lose his job, not his livelihood. Just get him off the G.I. Joe and put him somewhere else. He shouldn't be writing G.I. Joe. And they said, this guy said, it's the culture war. Do you understand? We've got a socialist writing a real American hero, Ethan. We need him there. That's when, that was when my eyes were fully opened. I understood that this is all a game. These people are fucking around. They're doing it on purpose. And they don't care who gets hurt. They don't care if this industry suffers. They don't care if the properties that they're sitting on and meant to steward suffer for it. It's all a fucking game to them. And they need to be fought. They need to be pushed back on hard, and they need to be pushed out of comics or what's left of. I guess there's no point anymore. Comicsgate needs to keep them out of Comicsgate. you know, and try to produce comics with the customer in mind all the time.
Renault for $5 says, does Croz think socialism is mainstream? Mags Visaggio said she wants to promote socialism in her books. How many pros haven't said so publicly?
Well, it's not mainstream now, right? I think most socialists are in the minority. We can look at the Democratic primary for that as an example, where Joe Biden absolutely ran over Bernie Sanders. But there is data showing that Zoomers and millennials are more likely to be socialists than obviously boomers, Gen Xers, and Gen Yers. So right now, no, but who can say 20 years from now?
Mags should be able to do that, though. I disagree, like, with the idea that Mags Visaggio should be able to make socialist comic books if that's what she wants. But just keep them out of, you know, don't make Captain America a socialist, for example. If you want to make your own comics saying whatever you want, do so and suffer the consequences.
No, I totally agree. And when I was making the analogy to music, I mean, a closer analogy would be like a big pop star doing a experimental jazz concert. Nobody wants to hear that shit. Nobody wants to see the band that they love come together for some improvisational jazz. They want us to hear the songs that they love. So
thank you for saving my wretched metaphor, Adam.
Well, no, it's the same thing when they're like, let's make Batman gay. It's like, come on, he's fucking Batman, okay?
He's fucking Batman. Who is?
Well, a Freudian slip, maybe. Oh. So anyway, Batman should remain true to the character instead of serving the social justice politics. And that's basically the argument that we're saying. You know, the social justice politics can come second as long as they don't destroy the character or the story. So contrast for $5 Aussie dollar says, this one's for Ray. Please say, let me finish in your tone for old time's sake, which is better. Which is better.
So I'll answer the first part before you read the second part then. So obviously the context behind that joke that the person's making in the super chat is that a long time ago when I used to appear on live streams that had far-right opponents who like viscerally disliked me, we would have a case where they wouldn't appoint moderators. And so I would open my mouth and say something. For example, like maybe there needs to be a public option in the United States for, you know, people to be able to buy in and get their healthcare stuff dealt with, except you would not be able to finish this sentence because immediately 8 people from the far right would be yelling over you, and then I would yell, no, let me finish. And then that was where that meme came from. So it became a little bit of a meme where I would go on, I would say a reasonable centrist position and be screamed at for approximately 45 minutes. So that's what they're referencing.
Ray, we tease you and call you a socialist. Are you really a socialist? Would you call yourself a socialist?
In a manner of speaking.
Obviously, she's a socialist, guys. We got to fix that. But anyway, contrast for $5 Aussie also says, which is better, Watchmen ending, movie or comic? Ray, do you have a? I think the movie ending is better than the comic, and Ethan, I don't think you like Watchmen.
No, I find it tedious, but I like the giant space vagina.
Okay, so you like the comic ending better?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Wrong answer. Croz.
I liked the movie.
Oh, better. Nice.
But that was like the literal only difference, right? Was the squid thing?
Yeah, the squid vagina.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I like the movie better.
Viking Insane for 2 Canadian says, whites aren't allowed in-group preference. That's the point that I made. You want to respond or?
I mean, it really depends on like from where that comment is coming, because I'm sure that comment was submitted because it was directed in some way toward me. But my point, which I've always made on that kind of issue when it's presented to me by people in super chats, is that like I believe that everyone should be able to have their identity and they should be able to positively affirm that identity if they want. So like, I'm not in a hypocritical position on that issue. Like, I think, like, I don't know whether the person who submitted that comment, like, knows the things that I've been cancelled and uncancelled for, but I'm pretty sure that, like, in 2019, people tried to cancel me because I said that people in Germany have a right to defend their German culture to the same extent that people in South Korea or Japan have a right to defend ours, right? So people then got super mad with me and tried to cancel me unsuccessfully. So I'm not a hypocrite on that position.
Yeah, bad communist. Anyway, Riano for another $5 says, Cause just said to me, black man, you're in trouble, Croz. Pointing out Riri being a bad character is an idiot while admitting he's never read her comic. Typical SJW flippancy. So,
yeah, I guess I'm just a massive racist.
What's that?
I said, I guess I'm just a massive racist. That guy got me.
Well, maybe a little white, maybe a little preference. I don't know. Comic book scrapyard for $5 says, just want to point out that Secret Empire sales dropped over 50% throughout its run. Hydra Cap was an outrage gimmick and didn't sustain readership. Yeah, I agree with Ethan's argument, Croz. I'm curious.
Wait. Can I just point out, directed to his comment? Find me a comic series where that isn't the case.
Okay, so you're saying that always happens.
That always happens.
But Ethan made a pretty powerful argument that it's kind of a bitch move to like destroy a character just for those initial sales. It's a sugar rush over a good hearty meal, let's say.
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree with Ethan that near the end that series fucking sucked. But it didn't have to be that way, right? We're just complaining about execution, not the idea.
So I thought you said you loved the Secret Empire series. I looked it up. I was like, I have to read this series.
Right? It's 10 issues, so it's like, if I loved 8 out of the 10 issues, like the ending left me a little sour, but I liked the concept, and it was good for the most part.
What was wrong about the ending? What was wrong about the ending? Because
nothing about it was like permanent, and the retcon... The Wish was stupid, and this happened. I hate when this happens in comics. Like, I'm sure. Are you guys familiar with like the original Civil War, the comic series?
No.
At the end of that, Captain America is assassinated, and I think he was brought back in like the most ridiculous way, where it was like, oh well, the bullet that shot him was actually like a time traveling thing, so he's just been traveling through time. I see this stupid shit in comics all the time, and it drives me crazy.
That's not stupid. That's cool sci-fi. I like that.
Oh, man. All right. I guess the main thing I've taken away from this conversation is that art is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, but the bullet that hit Captain America and killed him, but didn't really because it sent him through time, didn't destroy who Captain America was. I mean, you understand? Like, you can do stupid shit like that because it's infinite sci-fi. It's magic. It's you can do stuff like that as long as you keep the characters intact. Killing Barry Allen, bringing him back later, as long as he's Barry Allen, everything's fine.
No, I disagree that it's fine. My takeaway when I read Civil War was, wow, Captain America died for what he believed in, and he sacrificed himself. And then a year later, when it's undone by a magic bullet, it's like, oh, okay, that kind of just cheapened how I felt at the end of Civil War. Does that make sense?
You do understand then how the past comics can be cheapened by what they do in the present comics, because you're basically saying that that's what offended you about this. I mean, that's the same exact thing that we're saying about when they treat characters, long-running characters, without the respect that they deserve.
Yeah, I think the lines we disagree on are these alterations to characters and new interpretations. I don't think they're disrespectful to the original vision. I think that's our main argument from what I've gathered. But I don't think your argument is indefensible. I just disagree with it.
Comic Book Scrapyard for $2 says House/Powers of X last year sustained sales. So are you familiar with that comic?
Sorry, which ones did he cite?
House/Powers of X last year sustained sales.
Powers of X. I mean, I'd have to look it up. Let's say he's right. You found the one exception. Good job.
All right. So this was a great discussion, guys. I do thank you, Croz, for participating. If the other guy, I think it's Adrian, wants to reschedule, I'm happy to talk to him as well. Ray set this up. Ray reached out to me and said, hey, I'm learning about comicsgate and I don't know much about it. You seem to be into it. Would you be interested in having a debate? And I said, sure. So we have her to thank for this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it played out pretty well as well. So, I mean, obviously, thank you all of you for taking this on. And obviously, thank you to Ethan as well for showing up.
No, it's my pleasure. Yeah. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Croz, for being here. I enjoyed this immensely.
Yeah, we'll see. Let us know in the comments below what you guys think. Let us know your opinion, obviously. So I'll go ahead and leave it there. You guys can stay on, and I'll say a quick goodbye to everyone. Thank you for the super chats, guys. That's super generous of you. And we'll see you guys all in the next video.